Howdy, howdy. We are live on a very special day to celebrate 50 years of Star Trek animation with some lovely, lovely people. So, and I see there's folks in the audience chatting away. So,
Yes.
how's everyone doing? Aaron Harvey. We have two Aarons, but Aaron Harvey. Would you
Hello.
like to?
Can't do that with that hand. No. Yeah. So happy Star Trek Star Trek Day, I guess, like next day. So yeah, and it's 50th anniversary of TAS. I'm a little like out of it because I was at the strike line and dealing with like coming home and then just posting constantly for all the different things that I was sort of involved with. So that was that. It's weird how much tweeting can actually take out of you.
Oh no, that's totally fair.
Well, we had a lot going on yesterday. A big
Yeah.
Star Trek Day celebration. A little unusual this year with multiple industry strikes going on at the same time. But look at all the lovely people we have here to talk about the big 50th anniversary of the animated series, then kind of the legacy of animated Star Trek that has come on in the wake of that show. So if we want to like all go around, just kind of like introduce ourselves and say who we are and our, I guess, relationship with animated Star Trek or with TAS specifically. I know we
were going to do a bit, but it's not working necessarily that well.
No,
Never work with kids or animals.
We're gonna let like Aaron Walkie. Like Aaron, why don't you say hi to everyone and tell us what's going on there?
Hi everybody. I'm Aaron Walkie. I'm a writer and co-producer on season 1 of Star Trek Prodigy, and I'm a story editor and co-executive producer of season 2. And I have with me little Ramona. She is the littlest Trekkie to ever appear on this podcast. And it's very close to her bedtime, and mommy is at a nail appointment. So she gets to have her media debut before I have to put her down for a nap.
Right here.
Yes.
Plus, we have Ramona's chair.
Yes. Here, I'll put her in just so you can pretend like she was totally engaged.
Take a screenshot of it. Yeah, exactly.
I just love that she has no idea that there's all these people just talking about her and looking at her. And, yeah,
That's not going to work.
To be held.
Instantly crying as soon as put down.
Quick, everybody take a screenshot. Okay.
No.
We're recording it so we can go back and do that.
I'm just.
That's true. I
did the same thing. I'm like, wait,
I'm just
why
impressed
did you rush that?
I'm just impressed.
I've
you've
removed
got
it.
Now we only have
studio.
the baby only.
Just an empty chair.
Oh well.
now we got it.
That's for Elijah.
This is live. This is what happens when you have live television.
I got your joke there, Aaron.
Thank you, Rachel. I thought it was a good one.
Wait, what? That was from.
It's not worth revisiting.
A very, very Jewish joke just happened, and I was the only one who got
I get it now. Okay, yeah. Sorry. For some reason, I was trying to equate it to Star Trek. I'm like, what's happening?
And in addition to Aaron Walkie, we also have one of my regular Tex-Trek co-hosts, Rachel, here. So, Rachel, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi. I was trying to think. I don't know when I originally watched the animated series. I think years ago, while like having it on like while in college, and just like, but also my roommates were all there making a lot of noise, and so like recently I've been revisiting it. And like being able to like take my time with it, and so that's been really fun with everyone, like with all the anniversary and like talking to like Aaron Harvey about it. It's like cool because I can like I basically have a walking encyclopedia about the animated series.
I feel like the more like other stuff is leaving my head, I'm just gonna be only TAS eventually.
And Aaron, you for people who don't know who you are, Aaron Harvey, one of our two Aarons.
I am Aaron Harvey. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, we do Drawn to Trek together and Tex-Trek together,
and I am the co-author of Star Trek: The Official Guide to the Animated Series. And Rich Shepis, who was going to join us, is dealing with some personal stuff, so he sends his regards, and he'll look forward to watching this afterwards. So, but yeah, and I first saw, I've told this story like 3 million times at this point. Even Rachel knows that I would watch Star Trek with my grandfather, and we would watch either the reruns or the animated series, which was new at the time. And I was little enough that I'd like I was always waiting for it to be the other one. Like, oh, it's the cartoon one. I wanted the live one. And then, oh, the live one. Oh, it's the cartoon. So it's like in my brain, they kind of became one series, just with different types of media, which is kind of really how they wrote it. So
yeah,
I got the joke before, or not the joke, but the point of it before I was old enough to understand it.
And I think I've made this point to you before, Aaron, and you always deflect. But I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that you are one of the world's foremost experts on Star Trek: The Animated Series. You literally co-wrote the book on it.
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, I
One
feel
of
like you are.
like
yeah.
he's got to be
nightmares.
the biggest authority on it, right? Like,
Yeah,
I have nightmares of
that's
waking up
question.
one day and realizing that there's like 20 things that I didn't know, and then somebody like writes another book. And it's like, I'm gonna blow this book out of the water, you know.
Well, let them
It's
try.
like you get canceled. It's like you didn't
Yeah,
know
exactly.
shit.
Well, I almost got canceled, I think, for the Kirk is a jerk shirt, even though I didn't create that.
I mean, I want to buy one.
I already bought
I-
one. It's on the way here. So yeah.
The thing is that you don't have to carry it around up in here. You just have to know where your notes on it are or who to go ask. That's all
Grab
you
my
have.
book.
Yeah.
I'm sure you actually probably feel the same way, Larry. You've got so much
Yeah,
you
you
know,
can't-
percolating up there. You can't keep it all at one time.
You can't. Yeah, you can't do
Yeah.
it. And then, yeah, like I said, you have to know who to ask, where your notes are, or at least know where the bones are buried.
well,
And you've
Larry,
got some of those notes that we're going to talk about later.
yeah, Dr. Trek himself, the man who needs no introduction. But if you would just amuse me and introduce yourself, please.
My name is Larry Nemechek. I've worked around the franchise for a long time, but I've been a fan. I've been a fan ever since, famously, my 9th grade science teacher, first year teacher, shamed me into going home and watching Star Trek because it's after school reruns. And I don't know, are we telling our TAS stories yet? The funky truth is, just like Aaron, only the other way around. She told me to go home and watch it, and I knew there was a space show with a guy with ears. And we watched Lost in Space, but I didn't control our TV. My older brother did. But I knew it was out there, but I was vague. But she said, you have to go watch it. So I said, you know what? There's a cartoon show on, and I'm going to watch that cartoon show first before I decide if I want to watch which makes no sense, I know. But that's what my 9th grade brain thought for some reason. And so I actually watched, seriously, the animated before I did.
I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I
Do you
wanna
remember
say
what
it was-
episode you saw?
I've tried to think, just like I can't think of the first live I saw, but I think it was wasn't one of the good ones. It was either one of I think it was One of Our Planets is Missing.
That's a good one. It's not good for like a little kid though, or a younger person. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
cerebral and
Yeah.
kind of slow paced.
But it made no
feels
sense.
very Trek.
Like I went, here, I have a checklist of here's my qualifications that I'm going to decide. I mean, none of that made any sense at all unless you're like you're in 9th grade and you have nothing else to do in your life. So
Well, I can quickly give my first exposure to TAS before I have to put this little one to bed. It's okay. So I actually came late. All right, maybe she wants to be on camera. I don't know. So I actually came pretty late.
Ramona.
Came pretty late to the animated series because my exposure to Star Trek was all through traditional linear television. So like I grew up watching TNG and Deep Space Nine and TOS just in syndication. So it wasn't until I think much later in life, because I was a child of the 80s and 90s. I think I was maybe in high school or maybe even college when I realized I was vaguely aware that there was an animated series, but it wasn't really broadcast, in the 80s and 90s the way the other shows were. I think my first episode I ever watched was was it the very first episode of it where they find like a spaceship that's like 1 million years old?
Yep.
Yeah.
What was that one called, Aaron? I can't remember.
Beyond the Farthest Star.
Beyond the Farthest
Farthest
Star. I think that was my very first one. And then obviously Yesteryear was after that one, and it completely ripped my guts out. I was like, holy cow, this show is intense.
Like at the end where it's like,
yeah, when it's like, oh, I
lonely.
have to kill my childhood pet in order to preserve the timeline.
Oh yeah.
Yikes. So
We
sad.
actually have a theory about that too, is that the current timeline on Strange New Worlds, because he mentions that he had a Sailot when he was a teenager. This is the part of the thing where the Sailot had not died. So that's why we're getting all this overly emotional human stuff.
So you're,
because-
in that theory, you're saying a temporal agent traveled back to Spock's childhood and ensured the Salot survived in order to delay Vulcan's entry into the
something. Yeah, exactly.
It was just,
There you
it
go.
was just the absolute last butterfly ripple of Khan actually being 30 years later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the key. The Salot is the key.
Propagated through subspace.
Okay, I will be
The
back.
Salot verse.
I'll be back in like 15 minutes. But
Okay, sounds good, Aaron.
discuss.
Okay.
And
Dismiss cadet.
yeah, glad we got to
Cadet
check
or
in
ensign?
with
What
little
is
Ramona.
what is Ramona now? Okay.
She is 3.5 months.
Okay.
Oh wow.
By the
Or
way,
I
maybe
think-
a cadet or an ensign, but anyway.
We have someone left.
I was saying, am I ever gonna get introduced? I've been sitting here
Come on.
saying relatively quiet because no one said my name yet.
We're saving the best
we were
for
shocked
last.
from that. So that's
Well, I will.
But yes, introduce yourself by
We're
all
super
means.
organized. You can tell.
Oh, you're all fine. I've been just like, wait, should I start talking or what's happening? I've been trying.
this
to
was
stay out of
really the
conversation.
Ramona show, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I understand.
Now
is
that
a
she's
very-
gone, people are gonna tune
Yeah,
out.
well,
and
it's
just
even
like,
the-
yeah,
what's
why
even
am
the
I
point?
still
Ensign
watching?
junior grade Ramona. Hey, that's where we get our ensign junior grade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am Jesse Earl, aka Jesse Gender, on YouTube. I do many video essays on pop culture and Star Trek. Oh, thank you, DT. Appreciate you. On a bunch of like pop culture video stuff, political stuff, LGBTQ stuff as well, and the confluence of all those things. If I am an expert in anything, I guess it's sex and Star Trek, which is my particular expertise, which is more than you would think, unless you know Gene Roddenberry, in which case it's probably a lot less than you would think. But yeah, I got introduced to Star Trek when my parents were divorced. And so my dad, he would drive. We would have to like meet in between on weekends so that my dad could take me to his place and trade between houses and stuff. And so we would always have these like half-hour, 45-minute long drives between houses on the weekend. And he would play audiobooks and stuff. And then he got the Star Trek Nemesis audiobook, which he played for me. And I fell in love with Star Trek because the movie was not great, but the audiobook productions were amazing, especially at the time. So I stole it from my local library and loved the crap out of it. And then he bought me season 7 of The Next Generation on DVD because it had just came out, which means the first ever episode of Star Trek that I saw that I remember is Descent Part 2, which is
Wow.
like Next Generation is like a mostly episodic show, and if there's one episode where you need to have some level of prior knowledge, it is Descent Part 2 because it's a Part 2. It has Hugh, it has the Borg, it has lore, it has everything. It's like the only episode that requires some level of knowledge. So it's like start with Nemesis, go to Descent Part 2. It was a great way in, but it got
Jesse,
me.
that which does not kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. I mean, I loved it. I was like, I have no idea what's happening, but I love this. So that was a lot of fun. And then my encounter with the animated series is kind of very similar to what Aaron said, where it's like I was vaguely aware of it, but it wasn't really broadcast at the time. So I like knew it was there, and I was able to start watching it, I think in like high school, where Netflix started doing the DVD, like giving the DVDs, and they released the animated series on DVD. So I got the first disc of the animated series on DVD and watched like, I think it's like 4 or 5 episodes on there. So I saw Yesteryear, all those. Then my mom like canceled our Netflix subscription. So I didn't see the rest until like, I think 2015, where I'm like, screw it. And I downloaded all of them and I watched them all. I got them legitimately and watched them all in order from there.
As someone who did not grow up in the United States, I cannot judge anyone for how they got media.
I 100% got them legitimately. They were downloaded from iTunes, let's just say.
There we go.
And I was like the reverse of Rachel, where it was Doctor Who that I was having problems like I would get with it.
I was just, when I got to college, I was the best at getting Doctor Who episodes for people because I had knowledge from living. When things came out, they would legally come out like couple months later. They would come to the base, which would, unfortunately, the internet existed by that point, so you would get spoiled by the time. Like,
yeah, even when Doctor Who had rebooted, it was just like, oh, you just have to wait 3 or 4 months. Like then we know everything now.
Yeah.
Throw me up a wall.
But Larry, by the way, when you moved out of the way, it's like the background that you have is amazing. All of the stuff that's there, that's great, and the strike sign and
Oh yeah,
That's
it
what.
looks
That's
amazing.
my. Yeah, I just put the strike sign in there from yesterday. I was going to tell. It's amazing how many people I saw in photos later that I did not see, but how many people I saw.
Right.
But
Yeah.
like all the people that I missed in May, I did manage to say hello to. But then there were a lot of crew people that I had. John asked me to try to get to all the crew people that I knew, since it wasn't an IATSE or a etc. strike, but
Mhm.
they were trying to make it even more of a Star Trek day than the other day. So
Mhm.
there were a lot of so I was walking along and I've just gone blank on his name. Not Randy Oglesby, played Degra in the Zindi, which I've just ruined it now. Anyway, a couple of Zindi actors were standing there, and one of them said, Larry, and I said, oh, hi. It had been years since I'd seen them. And I said, oh, it's a Zindi reunion. And one of them said, oh, my God, Zindi. I haven't thought of that in 20 years. It was that kind of a day. And then I was like, wow, there are tons, including Aaron, who I've seen.
Well, yeah,
often.
Larry's like, oh, it's too bad that we didn't see each other. I'm like, but we did. And
Oh, well,
I waved at
you.
you, and you said, hey.
I met both
the
of
other
you.
Aaron.
even.
Okay.
Yeah, well, both of you too. Yeah, but I did. It was like a passing. That was much more of an organized picket where you could actually like.
It
do
was
the
very
circle,
organized.
and
Yeah.
you would see people walk by and go, and then later
Like,
I think I didn't
Did this
see
thing where
people.
I reach out to Bonnie and like grabbing her hands, like we're like getting pulled away from like some sort of ship or something like that.
Yeah. But no, it was but I knew the May one would I knew that would be different, but after I'd been there about an hour, I said, okay, so the May one was kind of like a huge family reunion. This is like a county fair.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it was kind of like bigger, and you might see people, you might not, and and just more of a kind of and a lot of people you had no idea who they were because they were fans, and a lot of people of those fans you knew, and a lot of fans who were just there. Anyway, it was a great day and made a big splash. Got a lot of media attention.
Yeah, and I think we have some pictures that we're going to share later that Aaron took from that. Yeah, and I'd love to
Not
hear
very
more
many.
about it.
It was very hard to take photos and carry a water bottle and a sign and try and keep moving. It was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But we can also, later we can tweet out like a link to the Channel 7 report or something like that, where you can see all moving
Channel
live
7 has made it a point. They were parked in exactly the same space they were in across the street from the front gate.
Yeah.
Same place they were in May for the writers.
We were
Group.
right behind them. I don't know if we were actually. Yeah. You could probably hear us, but I don't think you could see us.
Makes sense.
Well, I guess I should tell my my introduction to the
yeah.
animated series story, but mine's gonna sound similar to
So 2 years ago. No, I'm kidding.
well, like I'm about the same age as Aaron Walke, so like I grew up in the 80s and 90s as well, and I first saw it actually on Nickelodeon in the early 90s. I caught the first episode was actually Beyond the. I get it mixed up with the DS9 one, Beyond the Farthest Stars or Far Beyond the Stars.
Far Beyond the Stars, Deep Space Nine, Beyond the
Yeah.
Farthest Stars.
Beyond the
TAS.
Farthest Stars is the TAS one. So, but yeah, I actually did see the
Far
first
Beyond the
episode
Beyond the
was
Stars.
first.
Combine those somehow to like the one title.
It's like that with Wink of an Eye and Blink of an Eye. We were talking about that last night
yeah.
on the show, Aaron and I, and yeah, sometimes I can keep them straight. Or like when
Or
they
there's
take
also-
the out.
There's also Second Contact, Second Contact, First Contact, the movie, First Contact, the episode.
Contact,
Yeah.
first
there's
contact
past
with, like,
tense, future tense.
Mhm.
Everybody's tense.
past prologue, past
Yeah.
yeah, or like
Lower Decks the episode, Lower Decks
All-
the TV show.
And when
Oh,
you
yeah.
only had 79,
Kobayashi.
there was Return to Tomorrow is Yesterday, all are yesterdays.
Yep.
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's
so-
Kobayashi Maru. Yeah.
We should create do a pairing of those.
You
we
do
got
it, yeah.
Spock and Muck, Muck
I was about
Time.
to say Spock amok
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
I do love the only time that they reused a title like word for word, letter for letter is Anomaly. There is an Enterprise episode called Anomaly and a Discovery episode called Anomaly. So I think we should keep that the only time we ever have that anomaly of two episodes having the exact same title.
Well, we have the two Vics. They are still they might be
yeah, but it's spelled
different, but they're
differently.
still-
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But when you say it to somebody, it's like you have to qualify now.
You have to do
Yeah, it's
it
the same
you know,
thing with,
French or Canadian or something to get it different.
We can blame Aaron Walke and the Prodigy people for one of those too, because they had first con like dash like
Yes.
like a
I
con
mean,
job,
I
first
would
contact, so-
I would blame Prodigy for the worst one because they have Supernova the game and then Supernova the
Oh,
season
yeah.
finale.
Yeah,
So
there's,
they're both those are at least
Supernova
like
the-
everything else is at least like different series. Like it's both
There was another
Prodigy
one.
branded. Yeah.
There was a novel or like a book or something that was
At the very least, I'll give the
Supernova.
novel. I'll at least
There's
give the
been
novel that it's
several of
an
those, yeah.
adaptation of the game. So at least like
Okay.
there's a connection.
That's
there.
fair.
Okay.
But like the Supernova episodes and the Supernova game have nothing to do with each other in terms of plot other than being Prodigy.
Steven
it
actually
sounds
played
cool.
that on this channel. Like,
Yes,
we were
yeah.
watching
There's
some of it,
streams. People can watch my entire playthrough of the game, and you get like my commentary over it.
Oh, that's
And the
cool.
characters saying like 4 lines over and over and over again.
The absolute worst would be if there was an episode title that's the exact same title as a movie title. Oh, what there is.
Wait,
Yep,
it was like
first
what?
contact
First
and first contact. Yep.
Yeah. No, the motion picture, and then that famous episode, the motion.
The motion picture. Yeah.
But I have like a lot of
That might come up. Who
shame.
knows? I
with-
would see Mike doing that. Call it the motion picture.
I have a lot of shame with my like relationship with the animated series because I was a big like TAS denier. I was like, no, like Gene said it's not canon, and Michael and Denise didn't put it in the encyclopedia, so I don't like these weird force field belts, and I was like that for most of my life, I guess, until I was listening to a lot of podcasts on Trek FM, and I'm like, who the hell is this Aaron Harvey guy? He's like showing up on all these other podcasts talking about like, oh, the animated series this, the animated series that, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, man, this guy's annoying. But I actually like listened to like some of the stuff. He's like, okay, he makes like some pretty strong arguments. And I reevaluated. I rewatched all of the animated series on Netflix in like 2016-ish. And I was like, oh my God, I love the original series. Why don't I love this show? We get more Shatner Kirk, more Nimoy Spock, more of all those characters. We get a lot of the same writers telling the same stories. We get like sequels to TOS stories. We get returning characters, returning guest stars. And it's like, no, I was insane to ever deny it. I love the animated series. It's one of my top 3 favorite Star Trek shows, up there right next to DS9 of the original series. I adore it. And yeah, so I got to make up for all the years I think I was underappreciating it. So that's part of my endeavor now. But I think Larry has some history that he can tell us about. I guess the sad years after the cancellation of the original series.
Oh, I was just oh, by the way, everybody, I have a YouTube channel. It got started late. It's only 2 or 3 years old. It used to just be the server that you kept your videos on for your blog. Ha ha ha. But that nobody cared about until someone said, more people Google on YouTube than they do on Google. I was like, oh. So Trekland, thank you, everybody. And the Next Generation Companion and Stellar Cartography and all that stuff. The thing that you kept saying that, Father, like, oh, Larry's got this. We've done some things on Trek Files. We pulled bits and pieces out, and one of the funniest ones, and I had misremembered it, but there was a woman in this. So go back to the 70s. Go back to when the animated series was, and just like all Star Trek, any one particular new thing means 180 to different parts of the fandom, and to a lot of fandom, this was like, oh yay, we've brought Star Trek back. And there was a segment of fandom that was like, "Oh no, we want new Star Trek, and you're not going to get away with giving us a little cartoon. We want real people on real film." There was this attitude about like they're going to just throw us this bone and then hope we go away, and that's all. So there were people like, not only were they thinking that, there was a campaign to actually like to sink it, like don't watch it. Just the same way of like when Discovery premiered and there was like a whole, we don't like this, so we're all going to boycott it and make them give us something we want. And it's like, no, they'll just not do Star Trek then, you morons. It's not like they're going to spin the wheel and go, well, would you like this? How about this? It's like, no, that's not the way this works.
Not how it worked.
Star Trek fans being like mean about something new?
I've
never heard of that. That's why
I'm not understanding how the world works and how yes, it's capitalism or whatever, but that's our human nature. That's the way it works. So there was this segment of fandom that were like, no, we're going to not watch it and boycott it, and it's not the real thing. But there were a lot of people that were grateful. But it was a side casual. There was this one flyer from a woman that wrote Gene, and this is how clueless people could be. Young woman, I think. And they were very adamant. They wanted a movie again. And that's all Star Trek fandom was at the beginning. It was celebrate Spock and Vulcans and storytelling, and half we want a revival because no one had ever done this before. And it was just a stupid little 3-year dead show that who's gonna bring that back?
And this is a really different time than we have now. Like you didn't have shows coming back and all that.
Yeah.
It's all very new.
It's a 3 network world right?
Yeah.
Very big wall between TV and movies, nothing in between, much less overlapping. And things came and went, and nobody had repeatable media unless you were one of the kids that put a mic on your TV and cassette recorded shows, But you didn't, there was nothing, you had no power over your own media consumption. You had to take what they gave you, right? So there was this woman had a group called Star Trek Action Boycott, I think, or something. Anyway, it was called, the acronym was STAB.
Oh yeah,
And their tagline was like,
Father, he has
"Stab
it.
Paramount." And because they were boycotting anything of Paramount, that's what it was. Star Trek Action Boycott, got it. But they were going to
I'll pull it
boycott
up.
everything Paramount until Paramount gave them a Star Trek movie or series. So it's like, well, think this through. We're going to choke you until you say it's like a,
It's the Star Trek Association boycotting Paramount, so it's stab really.
Yeah. Thank you. But it was
So they couldn't even think up like a good name.
Yeah.
except to come up with the acronym they wanted. So they go
Yeah,
on
yeah,
and on.
exactly.
And the reason I associated the animated series with this was because she goes on, and it's a letter to Gene. It's a flyer, and then she had this cover letter. And she's like, "Gene, I hope you'll be with us. We're trying to," and he's sitting there like, "This
Please
is
help us sync your show.
Yeah, we want to sync all the people that you're negotiating with to bring your show back in a paradigm that's never existed before.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're negotiating with them, we're trying to kill them and stomp them into the ground. So I hope we're helping." It's like, what? But in the middle of all that, she says, and it's the flyer. So it's the flyer to fandom. And she says, "As to the animated, we are neutral. I repeat, we are neutral about the animated series." And it's like, okay, thank
She
you.
also says, "I myself will only
Excellent
quit when
speech.
I hear from you that there's going to be a Star Trek movie. Not possibility of it's going to be made, that it's going to be made."
I want a personal guarantee from you that
Yeah.
this movie is
I
happening.
want a green light, and then I want all the spectrums of the rainbow on that. Yes, we want it.
I like how
There
she
was
signs it, "Peace and long life, and may you find great happiness with a tribble." That's interesting.
It was
That's
the 70s.
It's a personally used tribble. It's fine. Yeah.
I'm saying it was a simpler media consumption, media delivery time.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I'll
related to
just
this
say real quick,
person, I don't remember this. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say this. So the Saturday morning it was there, and by I was a teenager by then, and I'd outgrown Saturday morning, unless it was like if it was a Warner Brothers or something classic, or might still watch it. But it was the era. A lot of that was the whole anti-violence thing. So all the superheroes went away after the assassination, after Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy's assassinations in Vietnam. And they had the whole cleanup. Why are people so violent? Oh, because Saturday morning. It's like it was the precursor to video games are violent. So in the beginning, it was Saturday morning's too violent. So all the classic superheroes went away, and like the Herculoids, all that kind of stuff. Nobody fought, and that's when you had all the teenagers solving mysteries and/or had rock bands. Okay, so that was the beginning of Scooby Doo.
We're solving mystery rock bands.
And Lassie's Rescue Rangers, and all that stuff, all the soft stuff, no superheroes. So, but even so I was like, I've watched Star Trek, but even then I would see the force field belts and go, "Oh, this is just cheap Saturday morning animation," and they're too cheap to draw spacesuits on them. It's a lot easier just to draw a line around the body. And so part of it was cool, but a lot of it's like, and the whole thing about the repeated animation, and the stuff we talk about now. But I was, 9th grade, 10th grade going, so I didn't really watch either. And then after a while, then it went away after a year or two. And then, Nickelodeon had it when cable came in, and also when we were recording, and there was no other way to see it. And I was starting to wish I had for research. And I mean, high school, college level research. And I started, and I never did this with VHS tape. The old thing people of the VHS era will know, when you recorded, you had a tape and you had 3 speeds. And if you recorded on fast speed, it was the best quality, but you'd get 2 hours. But if you really cramming, because it was expensive and you were just cramming, you could get 8 hours on a tape if you did it slow, but the picture was less and the tape would probably break sooner. So the only thing I ever crammed as many animated series as I could from Nickelodeon. And I wish I had that tape because it has the Nickelodeon commercials
and all that.
bumpers,
which they're on YouTube now, so it's okay. But I had those 2 tapes for like years and years and years and years and years. And all the thing about it's gone away. It's, the big thing, and you mentioned the encyclopedia, the whole thing there for a long time was like there was the animated series, and whatever you thought about it, but there was always yesteryear. And it was like yesteryear was the thing on the shelf, was the shiny, everybody, and Mike and Denise, everybody referred to, and then they used it in 09. But it was like there was yesteryear, and then there was everything else. And even though that included the Kazindi, and that included April, and that included all these other, things that we, but there was always yesteryear. And it was like, that was never questioned. That might as well have been, well, Dorothy Fontana wrote it. Well, she edited the whole,
Right, right. It was all
a lot of, but I remember doing doing canon stuff, and I'll shut up here in a second. But you know what? I'll save that. We've got 2 hours.
For a second, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to shut up. I'm just gonna
Keep going. This is my show now. Dang it.
No.
Just start winking off one by one.
I wish-
Bye.
I have 2 points I want to make. We have plenty of time to make.
I come back.
But
That stream is still going 24 hours
That was
later.
the time. That was the thing, and that was why that was. But a lot of people were just older, and it was like Saturday morning. We're just not paying attention. They were like, "Oh, that's nice," but we still want live action, and that was the main.
Yeah, but at
And
the
this
same
is not the
time,
same-
you had that segment of the fandom that was like, no, like I want you to cater to me and give me like a big, serious, high budget adult science fiction story. I'm entitled to that. Give it to me now. But you also had your younger audience that they were just discovering Star Trek, like after school, the syndicated reruns and stuff. And for them, like you were saying, Aaron, for you, it was just more Star Trek.
Yeah. And it related to the stab person. It's I think there's 2 separate people. There was somebody who was going around to conventions with a petition, having people sign it. That's like, no, this is not real. That was the first time we hear that it's not real Star Trek. That was fun. And
you're just slapping Star Trek on this and thinking we'll take it.
Yeah.
Which is,
Didn't
when
that
you
even
watch it,
technically
it's like
happen with
clearly-
season 3 of the original series too? Even because poor Fred
well,
Driver.
yeah,
A
kinda.
little after, all the
Yeah.
Spock Vulcan fan fiction people thought that Spock had been bastardized in Enterprise. He would never talk to strange women, about his sex life that way.
Oh yeah, like the
canceled
Druk
the-
scenes, not where they wouldn't have said canon in the 60s, right?
Right.
They would have been like that can't be in continuity. Like this, Gene Roddenberry left after season 2. The season 3 is fake Star Trek. It's
Yeah.
not real. This is new Trek. It's not
One
real
of the
Trek.
phrases was, "I don't
no.
accept the 3rd season." That was a big one. Yeah,
It was
wow.
what? What was
I
it?
don't accept the 3rd season.
I don't accept it.
I don't accept. This is unacceptable.
I reject it.
I do
Take
not
it back.
accept it.
Seriously. Yeah.
Bring
That's
it back
what's so
to the
funny about
chef.
people thinking all of this is new. It's like, nope,
I
this
know,
has
that's-
happened.
Right.
Even when the
you're not
original
taking
series was
Sylvan
on.
Webb away from me. No. Yeah.
And then there was another one that was basically somebody was trying to put ads in a newspaper that was basically, don't boycott this, don't watch it. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it's somewhere in all the Roddenberry archives. There's this letter that basically to Gene and Dorothy writing to somebody else. And it sounds like they've put a hit out on this person. That what they're trying to say is like, pay this person not to go into the new, not to pay the newspaper off, not to run this or something like
Oh,
that.
I think it was like,
But
was it the LA Times Review or something?
It might have been.
It was like a major newspaper reviewer.
But it was so weird. Yeah, it was so weird though. But if you read it wrong, it's like, are they taking a hit out?
Now I
on
feel
her?
grossly unprepared for this. Okay.
Silence this dissenter.
Yeah. But yeah, so there it's just kind of it. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, 50 years ago was not all that different from today. It sounds like that's early 70s sounds like such a crazy time in the Star Trek fandom, where it was when Star Trek died was kind of when it took off, when it began to grow. It sounds like,
This was just 4 years after the big save. I mean, this was active. Okay, this was Vietnam. Activists. Let's go have a sit-in. Let's go have a protest. Anyway, that was the zeitgeist at the time.
Direct
What we had
action
done,
was
and
trendy.
then they'd had the campaign to save the 3rd season, even though they lost it for a 4th season. But everybody had just seen what the power of protest and campaigns could do.
And by
So
the way,
that was still in the-
speaking
yeah,
of which,
that was in the air.
I met Bijo Trimble for the first time last night. Speaking of which, and she was an absolute delight. She was at the San Diego Star Trek Day event, and she was wonderful.
They're
So,
still out doing.
I'm so
They're
glad you
always
got
at
to meet
stuff.
her.
It's-
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wait, and it was her
That's
and John,
awesome.
or just Bijo?
Just Bijo John wasn't there.
Okay.
What is that?
No,
There's a story here.
I I hope he's in good health. That's all I know.
Gotcha,
Oh,
gotcha,
got it,
gotcha.
yes.
Yeah. I didn't. That was the drama. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Spill the tea.
What's the Bijo John drama? But no. She was. I hope he's in good health as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
Bijo was very. She seemed very excited and very happy, and seemed to really enjoy talking about Lower Decks and everything. So it was wonderful. So.
Aw.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, like if not for her, like I doubt we would be doing this now. So
Well, John Van
Totally.
Sitters had a good tweet this morning reminding the world of that. You know, we would not be celebrating any of this if not for John and Bijo.
No, I tweeted out a
yeah.
picture. It's like I got to meet the legend, and then JVC commented like, "She's above a legend. What's above a legend?" I wrote koala. She's the grand koala. But yeah, no,
Oopsie.
she is. We owe everything to her for numerous reasons. So yes.
and I know
Well,
see,
even
one
when
of
we were
our
doing this Dave Star Trek Prodigy banner thing, we were like, "Oh, this is sort of like shades of what Bijo and they were doing back then."
Yeah, it's true. I was asked about like what I thought of the campaign to save Star Trek Prodigy, and I was like, this is as close as you can get to sort of a legacy in the Star Trek fandom as you can get, leading all the way back to Bijo and John Trimble. Like it's because I think Star Trek more than anything, people view it more as a movement than they do as just a franchise. And I just read it. I think Variety just released like a list of the top 57 Star Trek episodes or something. And at the top of the article, I didn't realize this because I guess time marches forward and I don't notice. But Star Trek is apparently the longest running television franchise in America, at least according to Variety. It surpassed Gunsmoke, I guess, blew past it.
Wow.
Wow.
And I think that because of that, it has become such a cultural touchstone. People like the Star Trek fandom, maybe just because they've gone through this so many times now, because it's mostly a television medium, is like they will do anything to continue the franchise. So yeah, I mean the Star Trek Prodigy movement is the Save Star Trek Prodigy movement. I was deeply humbled and honored that it's swelled to the levels that it has, and I think it is making waves. As I've said, I think that there's a lot of people out there that maybe think it's hard to move the needle anymore with executives, but they do pay attention, and not the least of which some of the other actions, like similar to how Futurama was brought back because of DVD sales, the Blu-rays and DVDs selling out, the action figures selling out, those money talks, and people take notice. So, I'm very humbled and happy that the Star Trek fandom has rallied around our show the way they have TOS and TAS and Enterprise, and I'm sure others that I can't think of.
Aaron, I still say that the campaign has even within fandom has moved the needle, as you said.
Absolutely.
Tons of people who weren't paying attention,
Yeah.
they sat down to watch it, or they put it on their radar to do
It's
it.
this isn't just a kid's show kind of a thing where it's like, I saw some reactions like that.
I know a couple people I knew that were like doing rewatches in general, and they're like, "I'm gonna go and watch Prodigy real quick because they're trying to take it away."
Yeah, well, I think for lack of a better term, a better way to phrase it, I think the streaming era, there's so much content out there that it's a bigger ask, I think, to ask someone to pay attention to a show immediately, because there is this sort of idea that, I have literally every television show and movie at my disposal that I have to get through. I want to get to that, but I'll get to it later because it'll always be there. And as we've seen with every streamer, by the way, Max, Disney, Paramount Plus, and I'm sure Peacock has done it too. That's not necessarily the case. The paradigm is shifting, and so I think that was in some ways, as Larry was saying, a wake up call for people to check it out. It's sort of a use it or lose it kind of situation. And you're absolutely right. People were just starting to catch on, and that kind of threw gasoline on the fire of like I keep seeing the same reaction over and over again, which is, I thought this was just a kid's show, but it's actually for everybody. You should check this out. And, that's how you hit that critical mass to finally get to that level of people wanting to see more of it and it continuing for as long as you want it to. So
I think some of that also was like the original, kind of advertising. It's like, it's the first Star Trek show really made for kids. It's like, there's probably a better way to have said that, I think.
Yeah,
obviously you weren't in charge of that, but I mean,
Well, I think there's a way I would have said it is like it's a show that that is on the air that you can watch with your kids and introduce Star Trek
Mhm.
to your kids while enjoying it yourself. I know that doesn't fit on a tagline,
exactly.
but it's a
Yeah.
co-viewing
While
experience.
enjoying.
It's a show for everybody. From
Yeah.
as Rod Ronberry has said a few times, it's for from age 2 to 92. Like it's for everybody.
No
And-
1-year-olds are allowed.
Mhm.
No.
And it's but the other thing with the whole situation around the handling of not just the cancellation, which I remember when we talked like in April, you all were like, it's gonna land somewhere, but it was the erasure that threw
Mhm.
people. And that was, so that whole that 1-2 punch was what I think kind of triggered the old DNA of the fan activist, protest. And so it was partly like to get people to watch. I mean, people, I have to watch this. But then it's like, what, they took it away from me? Oh, by God, you're not, and you can't call yourselves the home of all Star Trek. And that good old letter writing protest, that's where the hashtag came
And
from.
unfortunately,
I will-
They said, you
50th
could do this
anniversary
to
of
Life, You
TAS.
could do it to DS9. You could do it to Discovery. You could do it, people were, it made it personal for people in a weird way.
And I saw that even last night, just to tell you, Aaron, because we were at the San Diego Star Trek Day, Star Trek Lower Decks showcasing that they did last night, and they thankfully actually showed Prodigy in the actual bit. And literally everyone stood up and there were several people that stood up and yelled during it. And then as the credits were rolling at the end of the night, people were yelling, "Save Star Trek Prodigy!" It was very much yelled in the crowd. So it's very much ever present in the fandom and very much thought of. So
Well, I mean, all I can really do at this point is just reiterate what we've already said at Star Trek Las Vegas is all of this sort of positivity and people finally checking it out and realizing what some of us do all along is all trending very positively. It is making a difference. As Kevin Hageman said, he's 99% certain that it's going to land at a new home and ideally continue from there, assuming that this translates to people checking out the second season, which I think it will,
We
we
were all really excited about the clip that we saw. Everyone was just like, wait,
you got
it
my little
stopped. Wait, this is
hologram
the show.
boy.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I mean, Robert Picardo is a truly delightful person, and he, the Doctor is one of my all-time favorite Star Trek characters in general, because I think just in that same vein as sort of Spock and Data, it's a very interesting angle of someone who is effectively a piece of software achieving sentience and kind of exploring what it is to be human, but with this assumption that they think they're already a perfect human. That's a really funny kind of paradox that the Doctor is in, where it's like, I have the sum of all Star Trek, all Starfleet knowledge, and my programming is perfect. I have perfect bedside manner. It was very wonderful to write for the Doctor, and I think that there's a lot of elements of his character, especially when it comes to young people, that people will be excited to see in season 2 as well.
Yeah, that must be a blast to get to play with some of those established characters like that as a fan yourself. That must feel like it must almost write themselves, those types of scenes. I know exactly how the Doctor would behave, and I watched 7 seasons of him on Voyager. I know what he would do here.
Yeah, it is kind of funny whenever we have introduced a legacy character, unless it's a character that you haven't seen in a really long time, and then they might, you wonder what the years, circumstances have done to them or whatever. But But with the Doctor especially, it's sort of a cliche, I think, for screenwriters to say I hear the characters talking in my head. But with Star Trek characters especially, it's very easy for me just to have Worf talk to Odo in my head, and it's fine. And so
they're independent character. I mean, it feels like when you're writing it, it's like, oh wait, this is just a real person I'm over here.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to the people who wrote them originally. Is they have a very distinct personality, and then I think that's the key to any great lasting character.
Yeah,
like Imres. To bring it back to TAS.
Well,
someone
literally,
speaking. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, even though it's not an official, I mean, it's not canonical. That's the most we heard her speak in that short, I think, ever. Like, she's said like 3 words in a row, and like, wow, she's speaking a whole sentence. This is amazing.
There was
Yeah.
someone when I tweeted out on X or on Twitter, I tweeted out that I was doing this live stream, and someone tweeted back at me. It's like, imagine the following that cat lady would have if that show came out today.
Oh yeah, totally.
yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But getting back to the animated series, Aaron, if you want to like talk about the I guess the book that you wrote a few years ago with Rich, and just kind of like that journey and just
Sure.
the TAS itself, like on the air, like in 73 and 74.
What do you want to start with? Just the like on the
I
air.
guess
I don't know.
Start with the book.
Okay. So Rich Shepis, my friend, who I used to write at Trek Movie, and I had done my podcast Saturday Morning Trek on Trek FM, and he loved the animated series and wrote a couple articles, and sort of like, why don't we just turn this into a book? You know, it's like, oh, that would be a cool idea. Excuse me. So we put together, he wrote some copy, and I did a design and put it all together, and like, I assumed that's how books were pitched. You know, that you showed them what it might look like, put it all together, and we were talking with Mike Johnson, who is the writer for IDW for the Star Trek comics, and he knows John Van Citters, who is the king of Star Trek? No, vice president of something. I don't know.
I think he would accept King of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Fleet Admiral?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek Fleet Admiral. That works.
There's Fleet Admiral.
I honestly
Van
don't know
Citters.
what his
Oh, an
title is half
admirable
the time.
John,
So.
but yeah.
But
He's a vice president.
Okay, that's right. It seems weird because like there's so many vice presidents too when
I remember
corporations
when
are
you
odd.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, I'm going to talk with John. Well, why don't I just bring this in and I'll show him because I want to see this book. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And we were like, oh, we'll hear back at some point in the future or whatever. And then suddenly we just get this message. It's like, yeah, we want to buy your book. We want to do this. We're like, wait, what? It was just like, because a lot of people have asked us, come and, talk to us about how you sold your book. I'm writing a book. I'm like, anything we tell you is not applicable to anybody else because this is just the most bizarre path that this book.
Yeah. Well, I feel like when it comes to Star Trek in particular, because there's only one place you can sell it effectively, it's a very different process than I think most of, like if you pitch a show, excuse me, that's a Star Trek show, you literally can only pitch it to one place, and it's pretty much up to them to say
If you want to give it the full treatment, if you want to be able to not have like fan, illustration.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You could do fan films, of course, but
No, I mean, like if you want to do a fan,
book.
you can't do fiction, period. But if you want to do a reference or an in canon, in universe, you can technically. You'll never sell anything unless it's so good they immediately want to go buy it. Otherwise, you'll never do anything for the franchise. But you'll never be able to take advantage of imagery and graphics and the delta and all the things.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Yeah.
But because it's such a massive franchise, because it's been around for so long, there's a big enough audience that there is always, as Aaron Harvey was saying, there is always a chance that whatever idea you have, if you can pitch it to the right person, they may say, yeah, okay, we'll take it out of this marketing budget or whatever. And I assume that's kind of what happened with you, right?
We got basically, I think, because John likes TAS, so I'm sure and there wasn't really much on that, and Star Trek was starting to pick up some more steam. This was before Discovery, but not by much. And so basically, he said, to be honest, like it could take months, it could take years, it might never happen. Like we have it, but now we have to find a publisher that wants to make it because CBS doesn't just print on their own. So we're like, okay, so basically it was like, don't call us, we'll call you. So I put a reminder to say this was like in, I think September, October. I put a reminder like December 31st, remind me to email John Van Citters in the new year, kind of a thing. A week later, we get this email. It's like, well, this never happens. Like what? Like literally after they talked to us about the presentation, Weldon Owen called and say, hi, we'd like to do something with animation. Do you have anything with that? I was just like,
Okay.
what? He's like, well, yes, I do. And then they sent it over. And apparently one of the things that sold it is that we made it look like an actual book. Like this, we wanted to have it planned out because I don't want to just go into it with just, notes or something. No one does that. He goes, we get,
The way
pieces of
Dean
paper
told
with,
us.
huh?
The way Dean
Handwritten.
went with his rumpled piece of paper.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
Somebody even like sold a book with like lined notepaper pad or school paper or whatever. I was just like, oh, okay. Being a graphic designer, it just was second nature to me to put it together. And Rich had been writing reference books and a lot of sports stuff, I think. So
That's
Yeah,
actually
that was
not. That's not dissimilar from what it takes now to sell the TV show. You have to. It used to be you could walk into a room and say, "I got an idea with some Jungle Book characters, and they fly a plane," and then they would sell. and that's I swear to God, that's literally
Sold.
how Tailspin became a show. But now it's and it was like an afterthought. Like he pitched something else. They said, "What else you got?" He's like, "I don't know, Jungle Book and a plane." But then
I love the Art Deco style of that
but
show.
no,
by
it's
the
a
way.
it's a fantastic show. I'm not knocking it, but it was just like that's how it was a different world of how shows used to be able to be sold. But
Yeah.
now because there's so much content and there's a lot of layers it has to go through, especially for Star Trek, you basically have to lay it out to where it's absolutely undeniable, and they look at it and they like, oh, I'm watching the show, or I can see the characters, and you just literally steal, like you can put together what are called lookbooks where you literally steal images from other shows or movies that maybe are not immediately identifiable to make it look like somehow you already shot the movie. It's crazy.
I had to make a lookbook for my film recently. It was fun because, like, oh god, what looks like what my brain thinks? It's a fun time.
Yeah.
A lookbook.
That's great. Yeah. So really quick to tie it back to Tailspin to Star Trek. Bob Klein, who did a lot of the original artwork and storyboards for TAS, I think also did stuff on Tailspin. And and Darkwing Duck. He created when it was 00 Duck to start with, which was what was originally going to be called, and he was a spy and everything. And then I think the people who did James Bond kind of got wind of that and like, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Very much like Deep Space Nine with
Yeah.
our man Bashir.
They were not happy. The MGM sent Paramount a very angry letter after that episode aired.
The 90s apparently were like, a time when Star Trek wanted to do, or people wanted to do James Bond stuff. So then they changed it to the Darkwing Duck to be more of a, because I think Batman had just come out at that point.
Yeah, it was Batman. I think, animated series had just come out. I actually had an office next to Bruce Timm when I worked at Warner
really?
Brothers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Nice.
It was
That's
it was so
awesome.
interesting because he always just looked very tired, but I think he had some sort of deal with DC Comics because of his contributions to DC, to where I think he got a copy of literally every single thing that DC Comics ever published.
Jeez.
But that's like almost like a Midas touch curse, where like every time I saw him, it was him walking out of his second office that was just filled with giant stacks of books, and he would just put them down and just with a note that said free. And so I have so many comics in my library that are just DC Bruce Timm's Castaways.
Nice.
Ah, that is so cool.
Sorry, I know
actually,
that has nothing to do with the animated series.
No,
I-
that's a
Fun,
perfect.
I like
that's
this
a
kind of
perfect
conversation.
tangent. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
that's so cool.
my biggest like fictional shared universe that I love, that I'm a fan of outside of Star Trek, is like the Bruce Timm DC Comics animated BTAS Justice League, all that stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
really cool to hear. Yeah, I love Bruce Timm. But Aaron, y'all's book, it also like covers every episode of the animated, all 22 episodes.
Yes.
And it for me, like, it was a great experience, like rewatching the animated series while also reading your book and kind of like going through it episode by episode like that.
Well, that's really what we, there were a lot of things that we wanted to do. We could have made a book 3 times as much based on like our research that we had. And we kind of got the directive semi early on that was just like, we want this to be an episode guide plus. It doesn't need to be 60 minutes. So we have stories where it's like, oh, that's an interesting story, and it puts somebody in a bad light, and then we didn't publish that. It wasn't
You
like,
need to go meta with it. Yeah.
there's a lot about filmation itself that we could have talked about that we didn't. So this is definitely a narrow focus. And I know a lot of people, like, it's gotten good reviews, but a couple of the pointed reviews are like, oh, you left this, and this out. Like, yeah. Also, sometimes we'd have to have a much bigger budget to add the pages to add those things as well. We wanted to talk about the novelizations from Alan Dean Foster because some of them are vastly different than what the actual episode is, and mostly because they didn't have the script. They just had like a page, one page outline.
What's the episode that he made into a full-length novel? One of them, it wasn't like there's 3 novelizations in a book. It's like
just
the whole book is one episode. Is it Counterclock?
I hope it was the Magics of Magus
Which
2.
that one goes hard.
I have them right over here. Let me keep talking and I'll check.
Like the last one.
I love Magics of Magus too. I think it's the most heavy metal episode of.
I honestly like
Trek.
perversely, it's like one of my top 3 of the animated series.
It is my favorite of the animated series besides Yesteryear because
it's my second favorite. My favorite is actually the Slaver weapon because I love the Kazunti. But okay, what do we got here?
Counterclock incident. Yeah.
Oh my god, I was okay.
Yeah.
So Bob April.
Ooh, I like that cover.
But
with Uhura in her like
just like leaning over like this. Yeah.
Half the time they just show that even when they're supposed to be sitting still.
It's just her laying side.
Is it Balance of Terror?
Painted, or if she's trying to look around Kirk to see the view screen, or what?
Does anyone remember which episode is it where the camera tilted and every actor went the wrong way except for Nichelle was the only one who leaned in the right way? But she looks like the dumb one doing it wrong because everyone else is doing the opposite. I think it was Balance of Terror. It was one of the early season 1 ones.
Canonically speaking, it just means the gravimetric plating was disrupted.
There you go. Yeah.
Aaron Walke, the king of head canoning salute. Like if you think you're in like a continuity pickle in Star Trek, he'll get you out of it.
That's the thing. Is like Star Trek has contradicted itself so many times that it's just a giant game of D&D rules lawyering, and you just have to make you have to make a very clean argument, and then the Supreme Crit Justices will just be like, yes, that's the one.
Related to D&D, we don't have to talk about this now. One of the things that came out yesterday is the Star Trek Adventures, Star Trek the Animated Series supplement, which I got to work on. I got to do a lot of the writing and the artwork. So it's a lot of a continuation of the artwork that I did for CBS, but I knew exactly where it was going to be. So it wasn't like I had to like develop a picture of Kirk that could be used on a shirt or a water bottle or who knows what, I knew exactly where it was going to go and what the point of it was. So that was fun. And I got to do all the animals and like the La Mancha and just fun stuff like that. So
I need to get my hands on the digital copy of that.
Yeah, they don't. It's not a printed copy, but I told people if they really want to get a printed copy that they should let people know about that. Like,
I will give them money.
You want to see? Yeah,
I will give them USD currency in return for a printed.
Everybody
copy
I saw at the strike yesterday are just like, oh, where can I go get the hard copy? I'm like, it's just digital. I'm like, I want the hard copy. So that's kind of cool.
I did the same thing. I wrote for Discovery season 2 and 3 ones on there, and it's like I want a print copy. Damn it!
Oh, cool. Did you work with Carlos Cisco? I think he worked on some of those too.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was funny
And
because they
Aaron's
reached out to
also
me. It's
worked on
like, can you write the queer characters? I'm like, sure, I'll write the queer characters. It was fun.
Yeah, I think in the animated series role playing game expansion, didn't you say, Aaron, that you have a lot of Aurelian stuff in there, and you have some connective tissue to Prodigy, because we have a sort of a stealth Aurelian character that's been waiting in the wings, pun intended,
and Lower Decks.
Show.
This actually kind of ties all the animated shows together. I guess I can talk about this now. The story is. The overarching story is Lieutenant Eric's, whose species lives for a long time. This is 100 years after the animated series, and it's basically in between, or it's right after Unification Part 1 and 2, where Spock has gone to Romulus, and basically the Federation is trying to figure out like what can we do to help the two species come back together, kind of unify, basically. So they're talking with Lieutenant Eric's because he was around at the beginning of the Score and Aurelian unification. And that came from a conversation with Mike McMahon, Brad Winters, and myself about like, that's not an Aurelian, that's a Score. It's like, they're the same model. No, there are actual small differences between the two species. And so they're like, well, maybe they unified. So that actually was sort of the beginning of that. So it's beta canon. It's not alpha canon, but maybe they'll pull that in. And then we were talking about the Aurelians. There's a flightless Aurelian in Prodigy, which we had never seen before. So I basically gave that subspecies a name and where they came from and how they basically didn't have as many predators as the other people did. So their wings didn't develop. It's kind of like penguins, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, there's flightless birds. There could be
Yeah.
a subspecies of flightless Aurelians.
Yeah, and they get along much better in Starfleet because Aurelians with wings, it's very claustrophobic on a spaceship, and you can't.
Yeah,
get
you have
to
to
fly
maneuver around.
Yeah, and we have a little thing in there about like Sulu suggested to Alec Ohm, who is one of the historians that go in yesteryear, that he go to the rec room and generate a image of a sky or whatever and fly around. And then he said, looks for all the world like a bird that's hit a window. It just went because it's not. It literally wasn't. This is not a great holodeck back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just smacked right into the wall. It's like so.
Yeah.
It was,
But
They
I
didn't
think,
call it a red deck for nothing. Yeah.
yeah.
but I think Adriku, which is the first officer under Chakotay and Prodigy on the Protostar before our crew finds it, is even name checked in there. So keep an eye out.
Yes. Yep. There's a list of when you see the species and what you can play. There's sort of like a list of like here are names of these species that you can choose. So I was wondering with humans.
Who
I
all
mean,
can
like
you be?
Fred, Steve, like
If I want to play like a Philosian or like the plant people from the Infinite Vulcan, like would they be an option in
yeah.
there?
Let me hang on one second. Let me pull up because we talked about a lot of them, and then it's like they chose which ones can be player characters and which can be.
I mean, if the short answer is, I think you could really just play as anything. That's the beauty of tabletop role playing games. You just might have to homebrew a little bit.
The new life path options are Aquan, Aurelian, Cation, Edosian, Kazinti, Pandronian, Philosian, and Score.
Is in the
There's a lot of
Kazenti
ends.
in the Kazenti chapter is there like a whole sliding scale, like a dice roll of meat preference of how much meat they want?
That's the one thing I did not do was like the game mechanics of it and stuff like that because I embarrassingly I am very RPG adjacent. I've done everything but actually play it. So
well, for you GMs out there that are about to do the animated series GM, that's an idea. If you have a character that wants to be a Kazenti, do a random dice roll to see their meat preference.
I will play that Kazenti. I would love to play a Kazenti in a role playing game.
And this is where we talk about how the Kazinti were also related to the Cations, which is something that's in Maressa's bio from way back.
And the Vidala?
No, we didn't have. It's possible.
From
But
the other field that gets
but they're not connected because the real description of the Vidala is also more marsupial than it is cat. So
it's that one image
in
concordance all those years where it's like, okay.
Well, it does look like it. Yes, it's like but what was I saying?
Is there anything about stasis boxes? I think that was also in the slaver weapon.
Okay,
right?
this is where like what I want to do impacts with game.
Well, that again, just another idea for you for the DMs out there.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because basically, we wanted to do something with the slaver weapon because it has multi-functions. Like, there's a lot of things that you could do.
Perfect
it was they kept seeing it was too powerful.
Well, wasn't that kind of the point though? Is like a doom.
Yeah, well, or the stasis
like a
box. Well, you
Genesis
could just put a ship in it, and then you cannot put a ship in a stasis box. That does not work. It's not a TARDIS. It doesn't work like that.
But it could also be like a live grenade that explodes. So you have to roll to see like, am I gonna get a live grenade or am I gonna get something cool?
There's so many. I just gave up. I'm like, okay.
No, again. GMs out there, these are free ideas.
Yes, totally do what you want to do. Yes.
No, it was a great experience. It was just there's always that thing that comes up like when you want to do something and somebody doesn't want to, and back and forth.
Totally.
We also. Oh, sorry. I don't know how much of this I should really give away. People should probably just get it. But there's some interesting stories about Spock 2, the giant Spock. We got that in there. And
we learn his fate, right? We learn how he got from Infinite Vulcan to where he is, and
yes,
in Lower Decks.
We learn why wasn't there a giant Spock at V'ger and stuff like that? Because he wasn't alive. Yeah, so there's that. And we also, for anybody who knows me and like our improv Star Trek, I got to beta canonize our ship. So the last ship that Eric served on was the USS McKinley. So I was very excited about
that's
that.
so fun.
That's fun. That's cute.
So, and
That's
Eliza
cool
Pearl
for
and
your
Bonnie
improv
Thornton
buddies.
both have their ship that they they were on in their game is also in Star Trek Adventures. So Eliza now has 2 ships that she has served on that are now in this.
In the greater Star Trek Adventures universe, I believe in one of the modules there is. I was telling Aaron there is a Lieutenant Commander Waltke in there.
Yeah.
I think I got kidnapped by Romulans or something, rogue Romulans, and if you can choose whether to help me or not.
Nice.
I think in the Discovery one, the thing that I added was I think I did Detmer's description. And so I was just like, for the OO Detmo shippers, I put like a line in there. It's like they have a special connection that is unstated or some. I forget exactly what I wrote. It was like, I'm giving this to you, shippers. It's there.
Yeah.
Pick it up, do something with it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So no, it's I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. We really tried to give some solidity to some of those things. It's like, this character said 2 lines. What do you do with that? It gives you a lot of flexibility, but sometimes a little too much flexibility, it feels like. But
that's the fun of GMing, though, is like it's sort of it's supposed to be like almost like a writing prompt, and sometimes
that's why this feels like really, really good at like this is a good stepping point because you can do pretty much whatever you want with a lot of these.
It's
where can
really
people
fun
get it? Like, or I'm sorry, but where can people? You can't get like a print copy, but you can find the digital copy where
Modifius.net, I believe. Is that what that
Yeah,
sounds right?
Modifius.net.
Yeah. And there's also there's another, I guess it's almost like Steam, but for RPG stuff. I cannot remember, like Drive Through or something like that it's called.
Shoot. Like I should know this because I've bought like Star Trek.
My phone just said, I don't have an answer for that. Thank you, phone. Yeah, but go to Modifius.net. You will find it there. But I think the one species that I did have a lot of fun with, because I did some research through one of the novels, because that's sort of like the secondary place that we had more TAS information, and you kind of had to. I now know when like, oh, why didn't you stick with what this person said? Like sometimes you have to cherry pick things for them to make sense. And so there was certain things that were live in the show that didn't fit with the backstory that was in a book or something like that. So we kind of like glued it together the best we could. But the Pandronian species is just really kind of fascinating. It's almost like a triple trill in some ways. It's just got this, like their life form when there's all 3 of the parts together, but they can also separate, but then those parts can go form with another group. So it's just like how many like different
33rd century programmable matter ships in the cells. They're just,
But basically it's like, it's kind of cool. Like, do we know if they have their memories are shared? And it's just like there's just a lot of interesting things, and they have a place on their planet that's just basically all these sort of constantly changing creatures that are sometimes dangerous as well. But the idea was that their big thing is they're prejudiced against other Pandronians that constantly change. They want, like, if you stay together, it's sort of like that's conservative and liberal.
I'm trying to remember the Pandronians. They were that's right. Okay,
yes.
So
they've been resurrected on Lower Decks.
Yep.
Yeah, I wonder if that
original
concept was at all an inspiration. This is probably too nerdy well, maybe it's not. Not
for this crowd.
I was
not for
saying,
this
look
audience.
where you're at.
So there was a book that came out in the 90s that I believe won the Hugo Award for Best Novel called The Fire Upon the Deep. And there was an alien species that operates very similarly to what you're describing, Aaron, where they were like sort of almost like alien dogs, but they would connect together and they would become different entities depending on how many connected together. It just reminded me of that very much.
It's kind of, the book is interesting because you hear all these really interesting things, and then I talked to my secretary, and you're like, what? why do the Pandronians have secretaries and waiting in their office? It's sort of like it just was this weird juxtaposition of like things. It's just like okay, whatever.
Hey, Aaron, as you were working on Pandronians, did you try to ask David Gerald about anything?
A little bit, but he was like, not so. He was basically sort of like, that was a long time ago, and it was,
It's 50 years ago. Leave me alone.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, he's kind of done with talking about Star Trek most of the time.
Going back to the first spark of anything, it's like that's why I love to talk to Dorothy about Andorians and Tellarites.
But I did see David Gerald yesterday, actually.
Nice.
So
And Ben
and
Hogan didn't come up. I can't
And
believe.
you, and you quickly asked him some questions about Pendro.
yeah, right. No, like, it was one of those like we're walking past each other. It's like that was kind of nice actually because it did stop clumps of people from joining, and like it became much more about being there as opposed to seeing the people. So I thought that was I think it was a good thing that they did that. But yeah, so that and just the what was the other thing that I really liked working on for the characters? Hang on one second here. Aquan's creation. I drew my own Cation. That was because we mentioned Cations a couple times. It's like I can't put another picture of Maress in here. It's just like that's the one Cation that we have. So I created a male Cation, which if you read the book novelization where there's a little bit, it is her kind of like ex-boyfriend or friend.
Interesting.
Basically, the one that her mother claims that he's the one that conned her into going into Starfleet. And literally, it was just really she was the one who inspired him to go to Starfleet. So interesting. Kind of a fun
Because I think this is probably the right crowd because I believe there's like in one of the Star Trek movies you see like what could be identified as a Cation like in the background, right?
Isn't that in motion picture?
I want to say motion picture.
Yeah.
Well,
There's also
Star
one
Trek
in Star Trek
4.
4.
About the
Yeah, so
portrait
it's Star-
or the water.
Oh, and there's when they also come back and are on trial and right after.
But he almost looks like has like a Puma coloration or something. Yeah.
And according to
Also-
Damon Lindelof, the twins that were in bed with
I was
Chris
saying,
Pine and Into
like,
Darkness
Kirk-
are Cation, but
Kirk had some fun times with some Cations. Yeah.
they were they looked more human. I think they might have been like 80% human and 20% Cation, but
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll mention in here, I guess two things. The Megans from Magic's Megas 2. If we've watched this so many times now recently, it's like they're basically Q. So
No, if you watched, I rewatched it recently, and I'm like, the structure of this is almost exactly like the counter.
there's a trial and everything.
Where
So
there's a trial, and you're like, you don't know what you're supposed to do one way or the
Trelane
other.
all over again.
Yeah.
So I put this is a note from Eric's like some Starfleet anthropologists believe that Megans are a proto-Q society, while others conjecture that they may actually be the Continuum, just at an earlier stage of development.
How
So that was
interesting.
kind of our
Ooh,
fun
that's-
idea.
that- now you're thinking fourth dimensionally.
Yes.
There
So
was
that, and we also explain why pink tribbles are pink, but I won't say it
Because they
You
ate
have to
too
look this
much.
up.
They ate too much krill, like flamingos.
No, it was the Frankenberry from the 70s, the cereal.
That's in there. Yeah.
There's too much Klingon blood, reddish pink Klingon blood.
Yeah. Oh wow, that actually works.
It's dark.
How? Oh, that'd be amazing if like a Klingon sees a pink tribble and just his eyes
Like,
go wide.
yeah, it's just traumatizing.
Like the pink ones are the worst. They're the scariest to a Klingon.
Yeah.
It means that they have
Well, there was a
consumed
giant
enough.
one.
They've
Big.
consumed enough pink Klingon purplish pink that they've taken on
They-
the coloration.
They just died. They just bathed in Klingon blood. Dear God.
Okay. I should
We've
mention
gone
that
into the dark world.
we ran a poll in the live chat who's the best animated series cat aliens out of the Kazinti, the Cations, the Capellan Power Cat, and I had someone else in there.
Power
But the Kazinti won with like 68% or something like that.
I just think
so-
they're very memorable because Larry Niven literally had already fleshed them out. So in their admittedly brief appearance, and I'm sure Larry has a million things to say about this.
This is one of the things. So we haven't talked about this. We should talk for at least a minute about how the animated series, and this is one of the meta things you probably didn't. I'm trying to remember if you even got to this, Aaron. I don't think you did in your book. The whole thing about where they existed. Like everybody loves to talk, or they talk now in hindsight, about when it was made and it was canon at first and then it wasn't, and Gene didn't want it to be, but that's a misnomer. It was really Richard Arnold didn't like it, so he kept it. And he's the one that said it wasn't canon, and Gene didn't care, and Gene was gone, and then nobody cared about the animated series at all because it was the wacky, because the Berman years were straight laced and all this stuff. And then finally, when there was no current Star Trek, studios looking around and go, "Oh, we can sell these. Hey, they're canon again." And it's like
They never were not canon.
But they were, unless I'm mistaken, like Larry Niven had been writing in his short stories. He'd been writing about the Kazenti, and then
The whole known universe. Yeah, he was in an established universe at the time he sold.
Yeah, and then he just like was like, yeah.
The way I think about it is like the known universe is just a parallel universe without the Federation and stuff. They're just it's the same.
Yeah,
there's similar elements, but not exactly the same.
But I was joking about the meat preference, but like rewatching the episode, they do talk a lot about meat.
Yeah.
Well, if you think like they have a Kazenti telepath, and if you think about eating vegetables, essentially,
that's how Spock
makes them freaked out.
Spock screws them up because he thinks about his lunch.
Yeah, like I love that. Like that's what grosses them out. Like, that's their kryptonite.
I eat leaves and roots.
Like their weakness is like, like think about eating broccoli, and like that is
vegetarians
their Kazenti kryptonite.
It kind of seems like a rather glaring weakness.
But it speaks to like a lot of like world building, and like Larry Niven had already thought this stuff up. Yeah,
that was my ultimate point. Is like it didn't feel arbitrary. It felt like he was scratching the surface of something that had been thought about a lot.
Right.
It was totally.
It gave it a nice depth.
But part of what I think nobody cared, or he didn't care. I mean, this is like 1973 franchises and IPs and all that, where no one cared because 99% of the world didn't make enough money for anybody to care about it. And this was just Saturday morning kids TV. And I maybe you know the exact story about I should know this about how it happened, how the slaver weapon even happened. But the bottom line was going away from it. The eight people in the late 70s, early 80s who were trying to canonize and world build. Jeff Mandel was one. I was another one. And it was like, well, we looked at the animated series as canon, and which was problematical. And part of the reason I thought it wasn't canon was because at some point somebody said there's too many issues. It's like we'll pull yesteryear out and everything else in, or case by case, because the known Niven's universe for the Kazenti, the first contact that humans had was with the Kazenti. Right. So if you're going to pull the Kazenti universe in, does that mean you pull the whole thing in?
Yeah.
So for 10, 15 years, we went with the thing of the first aliens humans met were the Kazenti. And then we get into Vulcans and so after 96, it's like, well, no, that's out. So then it's like, well, you pick.
I don't know if I ever thought that.
Well, when I first watched the episode, I do remember doing the mental math when I believe they Sulu or somebody says like, oh, every time the humans interact with the Kazenti, a war breaks out ever since we first met 200 years ago. And I was like, wait, when did Archer? When was it? But
not all of it works.
But my point is, there's other lines in canonical Star Trek that are equally problematic. So, like I believe, even was it Space Seed or somebody? Or no, it was. I'm sorry, it was a DS9 callback to that. It was the DS9 callback in Dr. Bashir, I presume, when they mentioned Khan. He says, for 200 and something years, and if you do the math, it's like 100 years off.
And it was, and Ron later said it was
fine.
But he's so specific. He says like for 230 years.
It's kind of like if we said, when America was formed in 1623 or something like that. You're like, what?
Right.
It's really off.
Ron Moore said he was totally thinking of the Khan delivery and not going, and we're 100 years past.
No, I think he since admitted that it was like, I could have phrased it.
It was a total. It was like
my point is like
nobody along the way caught it. That's the
worst thing that can happen is Sulu was nervous when he was talking to the carnivores that were contemplating whether to kill him.
Or Sulu is so on top of his game that he converted it to Kazenti years to what their solar system a year is and gave it to them that way.
It was the Kazenti solar calendar.
That's the type of thinking that gets you in the captain's chair, the Excelsior, eventually. So there you go. But now we have Kazenti on lower decks, which is every time I see Ensign Taylor, I get all happy and excited. He's already shown up in season 4.
Weirdly, that's one of my favorite jokes in Lower Decks is with that when he says like you gotta stand up straight, you'll get bad posture. And he goes,
it's really
does the telepath thing.
In the trailers, you can see that they have like a ring world type planet, or not planet, but a ring world society. I really hope that we see the Kazenti with the ring world because it's like, oh, that would be a good put together, or that, or maybe Pearson's Puppeteers. So actually, we did see in the second episode of that's been out, there are two birds. There's a birds that have like two heads. They do look a lot like the Pearson Puppeteers, but they're not them.
I was going to say, and one more Kazini bit is
Yes.
The pitch for Manny if they'd gone a 5th season of
That's right.
of Enterprise,
Yes.
doing it Kazini,
That's so
and
tragic.
bringing them back
Yeah.
to something ferocious, and
That's so heartbreaking. We didn't get that.
yeah.
And
One
the,
of
the short treks are bringing Trip back at least. So.
I know my
Briefly.
boy, my little southern boy.
Has
Yeah,
anybody? But is it a? Has anybody been? I don't know. But I'm sitting there. What could be a holodeck? It could be a flashback. It could be a.
I mean,
love
I don't think I'm allowed to say. I wrote the episode that he comes.
Yeah,
back.
I was about to say, like, we have the writer right here.
Look at you,
Like,
bringing back all my. All
Notice
my
I did not
boys.
even ask. I didn't go there.
Yeah, no, you laid it out. I mean, I don't. Yeah. So basically, the the long and short of it is, I really wanted, like, Trip was the one character that I wish that we had the character count that I could have put into Kobayashi. But because of just the way the pipeline works for Star Trek Prodigy, like, there's a literal physical limit to the number of character models that they can design and still have the episode come out.
Yeah.
And so I had to make some really tough choices based on a lot of different stuff, but it always irked me because I was like, I wanted Enterprise rep on that bridge, but then at the same time it's like, well, also, like, why would they have multiple engineers on the bridge, yada yada yada. So but it always kind of was like floating in the back of my head. It was just like, how can I get Trip back? And then when I was asked if I wanted to pitch and write, like, essentially sort of like a sketch, like a comedy sketch set in the vaguely Star Trek universe.
These feel like Saturday Night Live sketches. That's
Yeah,
sort of
it's like a
the way
Saturday
I look
Night-
at it. I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. You know, it's like,
Saturday
I
Night
Yeah.
wasn't sure how to take
If-
it at first. I'm like, oh, that's kind of funny, actually. Okay.
Yeah, I had some people say, no, it has to be canon. I was like, okay, if it's canon, then it's a universe that was created by a drunk Q. Okay. He snapped his fingers after.
Yeah, I
too
gave
much.
up on Twitter with that. It was just like, okay, fine, whatever. You can believe it's canon. That's great. Whatever.
But
That guy
anyway,
really drug the whole panel up onto the bridge. Whatever.
Yeah.
it's a hologram. It's all a hologram.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Yeah.
or it's a
we're-
cartoon that exists within the Star Trek universe. It's like
Yeah,
it's like
There
a,
you go.
it's
that
a
works
promo for like the Starfleet documentary network. You know, like it's like
Yeah,
it's one of their promos.
Brought to you by Tribble Cereal. I mean, we've already been
Yeah.
here. So
One
Yeah.
way is that we retconned it at one point. It's like it's the equivalent of like Disney when they do history. You know, it's just sort of like it's in the universe. These are stories that they are telling, but for kids or something
Yeah.
like that.
I won't give too much away for my little short because I think it is kind of fun based on
Yes, we wanna be
surprises.
surprised,
But I will say that it very much was inspired by, like, as I was pitching it and writing, I was like, what if Philip K. Dick wrote an SNL sketch?
Oh God.
That's
Oh, wow.
kind,
That
so that's
sounds
kind of my
wild.
approach.
I'm excited now.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be, but I'm curious to find out soon.
Drug use, I think, somewhere in there.
Right.
Probably.
Yes, we're all trapped in a specific year, 3380. Anyway, no, that's too Philip K. Dicky. I will.
Should we talk about lower decks for a little bit, Aaron?
Yeah, really quickly before we move on, the related
It's
to
the
Larry
story
Niven and the Kazinti.
they did Tucker too.
Yes. the at one point there's a video of Dorothy saying that, you know, she contacted Larry Niven and she just apologized profusely for the pink ships and the pink cats. And when we talked to him in person, he's just like, I've told her like 3 times. This is before she had passed away. You know, it's like, it wasn't a problem. Go back and look at my story from 1970. It's like they describe the Kazinti ship as having a shocking pink hull. So it's like, and he said there's plenty of pinks and purples on the Kazinti homeworld. I'm like, okay. So that's the one thing that they did get right, even though they were not trying to.
How interesting.
So that's it. That's all I had. Yes, lower decks.
Yeah, I mean,
Lower decks.
Lower
Lower
decks.
decks. Lower decks.
Which is a love letter
kind of
to
the,
TAS a lot of times too. That's what.
Yeah, it definitely
fantastic.
more so than anything else. Like it's I mean, a lot of shows have referenced TAS. You know, like DS9 did a lot, Enterprise did a lot, but Lower Decks really seems to love the animated series. And I know people who really love Lower Decks, like including Jesse Gender here. So I don't know,
Yeah.
Jesse, if you want to If you want to talk about your love of Lower Decks at all.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I could rant all day about Lower Decks, and have done many hour-long
go get some
videos
lunch.
about.
Keep talking.
Yeah. I'll keep it short. I mean, what I really love about Lower Decks, and like this current animated corner of Star Trek generally, which includes Prodigy, is just it feels like it captures what I particularly love about Star Trek the most, and it is the earnest kindness that I think you get in all the other shows, I think too, but there's something with the way Lower Decks particularly I think captures just every character just always has just a moment of just pure unbridled joy at being alive. Like I think of the moment where Rutherford like loses his memory in the season 1 finale, and Tendy just goes, "We get to be friends all over again," or it comes back a lot to Tendy, or even like in the Crisis Point 2, where you have Knick Knack, the like AI generated character from that, where he just goes to. Yeah, I am Knick Knack. Where he goes like, "I love you" to Boimler, and Boimler's like, "Oh, I love you too, buddy." It's just a constant affirmation of kindness. There's no
there's the romance.
Yeah, it's like it's just there's no sense of like just being weirded out by anything. It's just a joyous acceptance of being alive and of accepting others. And I think it really captures that Gene Roddenberry quote of, we humanity will evolve on the day that we learn to take delight in the differences of each other and the differences of life forms. And I think Lower Decks like really captures that. And the thing that I love Lower Decks a lot for too is it understands what I think, and this is me saying this, I'm not putting this in anyone else's mouth, but like what I think sometimes a lot of other modern Star Trek shows forget, which is, and this is my big problem with Strange New World season 2, was it was very much about like, oh, let's venerate Starfleet, let's venerate the Star Trek aesthetic of this world, and we all serve, our purpose is to serve the mission. And it's like, no, what for me Star Trek is always best about is that Starfleet and the Federation in this world is here to service the weirdness and diversity of individuals. It's about being here to enable us to express our own joy in who we are and be a system that is trying to be there to enable people to be able to do their best and to support each other. And I think Lower Decks just gets that sense of support and difference, as does Prodigy, by the way. And so, and finally, and I think this, the thing that I love also Lower Decks for is while it is a show that a lot of people like to pigeonhole, people critique it, say it's like, oh, it's an Easter egg filled show, it's just nostalgia. It's like, no, it loves the weird aspects of Star Trek, and it loves to point out like these weird, like specific things, but it does so in a way that like loves the weirdness, but doesn't venerate it as like holy, and we can't ever critique it, but it actually does actively critique Star Trek, like with Tendi and the Orion storyline, and breaking down the monocultural bits, or pointing out some of the cultural appropriation, like in Crisis Point 2 with the Hawaiian storyline with Boimler. It's like this is weird culture appropriate. Like it's pointing out these problems with Star Trek in a way that like loves it, but is willing to say like, yes, we've grown from here. And it goes to that Star Trek thing. It was like, we always must strive to be more than we are. It's like loving the past, but being willing to critique it and look and not perpetuate its mistakes, which I think some of other modern Star Trek shows, and again, my words, no one else is here, but other modern Star Trek shows, I think sometimes venerate the past too much and end up perpetuating some of the problems of the past. And I think that's the only way that we can push Star Trek forward, which is why I love, and I'm not just saying this since Aaron's here, but why I love Prodigy as well, because it takes it takes Star Trek, and both Prodigy and Lower Decks take Star Trek, and I think have a love of the past, but are willing to do new things with the past. Whereas I sometimes think, not always, but I think especially, some of the live action counterparts are a little bit more stuck in wanting to like just do the tropes, do the veneration of the past, do the same thing over and over again. Whereas Prodigy and Lower Decks are like being like, we love these things, but we're going to show them in a new place. We're going to have Janeway in a new place in her career. She's not going to just be doing the same thing that Janeway always did. Or we have, different characters from throughout Lower Decks, doing new things.
They're
instead
also
of
changing.
fearless.
It's not just a remix. It's
Exactly. It's not-
Not
it's
putting it
not-
into like a slot machine and going, okay,
Exactly.
Janeway, Chakotay, this person.
It's not again, this is my words, no one else's here, but Picard season 3, where it's like, let's bring all the characters back and put them back doing the same thing, fighting the same villains on the same ship that they always did. And again, that's my criticism. It doesn't have to be anyone else's. So that's why I love animated Star Trek generally and Lower Decks specifically, because I do feel like it is the place where, because it is, you know, it's allowed to be a little bit weirder, it's allowed to be a little bit stranger, and it's allowed to I think do new things because there's less eyes on, I feel like, and that's just sort of my that's sort of why I love animated Star Trek and Lower Decks specifically. So that's my mini rant. I could go for hours more.
I think
Well-
in a lesser degree, TAS is like that too for the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
it's obviously not as
Oh, right.
progressive as it could be, but you know, the fact that we got Lieutenant Uhura got to actually take control of the ship twice. I know
Yeah.
a lot of people forget about Bem when she
Well-
was actually in control of that. And
I can certainly speak to that because you know, on when I was trying to source all the audio clips for Kobayashi, as people know, like most of the stuff in it was archival material that I had to go through, and I literally, when I was trying to find lines for Uhura, I listened to every single line of dialogue that Uhura spoke in all of the original series. And it's not much.
Yeah.
It's like, it's shocking how little she speaks in it. And it wasn't until I got to TAS where I was like, oh, there's like a whole episode where she's like in command and she leads like a tactical squad to go rescue the
red
men.
skirts.
Yeah. And it was I was like, oh, because I was having like a cognitive dissonance, because I was like, Uhura was like one of my favorite characters, but I'm watching TOS and she's mostly just sitting on the bridge. Like, where am I getting this from? And I realized it was because it was like, well, there's a few episodes like Gamesters of Triskelion, and then like you know, I forget which episode where I'm blanking, Naked Now or something, when you know, there's a few tiny moments where like Sulu is like, you know, let me to rescue you, fair maiden. She's like, neither, thank you. And then but it wasn't until TAS and the movies that she got to really become like a fully fleshed out character. And I feel like
with a lot of the rest of the little five. Did you get to access?
Well, it speaks,
or did it have to just be? Were you only let loose with live action and TAS for her lines?
I could have sourced the movies too, but I did go through the movies, but a lot of them were a little too specific to the events of what was going on in the thing. So
I also like, I mean, there's a big break in time. Like, people's voices change if you're going back and forth between the two.
Yeah, and that was tricky as well, especially with when I was told to only use like Leonard Nimoy lines, and I was like, well, you realize that his body of work is either made in like the late 1960s, a few bits in like the 70s and 80s, and then like 2000 onward. So but you know, I think people at least got it for what we were going for, and it was a holodeck program that was going way off the rails, so people were fine with it. But
I mean, it speaks that
the holodeck was just having. Oh, sorry.
Oh no! I was
just joking that like holodeck was having audio problems.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a prototype ship. You know, it's fine.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, it's interesting you say that about Uhura's lines, because I think that like speaks to what, you know, we've talking about, like the animated series getting to do more things. You know, with, you know, there's the stories about Gene Roddenberry having to fight to just have like a woman of color, a black woman on the bridge, and those sort of like, you know, there was a lot of eyes on her just being physically there. But then the animated series, like, oh yeah, we could have her be center stage, we'd have her be in command, because less people are paying attention, and you know, there's gonna be less studio notes and less like concern from like, oh, the conservatives are gonna write in about whatever. And it speaks to, you can even see that today too, in, you know, one of my critiques too of like Strange New Worlds season 2 is like there's a lot less queerness that we've seen grow more on live action from like Discovery on screen, and it feels like it was downplayed. But then you look at something like Lower Decks and Prodigy, where like queerness is very ever present. You know, there's you know, Lower Decks, there's just characters will like hit on each other regardless of gender. It doesn't seem to be a big deal, whereas, you know, live action's a little bit more, you know, I'm sure there's probably a billion notes being like, oh, there's a queer character in this, you have to make sure that, you know, approach them the right way. And so
even Cation or Tiana and Jax.
Exactly. So again, these are my critiques. I'm not putting words in anyone else's mouth, but it's just interesting to see. Like, I think that there's a level of being able to, showcase the fullness of humanity in a way that doesn't have this sort of like executive brain sometimes in terms of like how we
DS9 when they were ignored and just did their thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, there's the last 2 seasons. Yeah.
Talking about Uhura, there's a huge. This is one of those things about context and did you live through it, and even looking. There's a huge seismic shift between Uhura created in 1966 and animated series in 73. You think about, there was never a toilet flush on TV until All in the Family in 71. Just think about that.
Yeah.
So, or Lucy couldn't say I'm pregnant with little Ricky.
Yeah, they always had to say I've got a bun in the oven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or they always have him go like unspected.
That always
I'm expecting.
Toilet flushing was first heard on All in the Family in 1971.
That's so weird.
Yeah, you have children when your beds are separated anyway. So,
you're right in that just culturally
the treatment could have that benefit from that. Yeah.
Once with a cousin who was younger than me, and like for some reason I Love Lucy was on TV, and she's like, "Did people actually do that?" And I was like, "No, people did not sleep in separate beds."
Or everyone except for the Munsters did that. Everyone except for the Munsters slept in separate beds.
Yeah,
up until the 70s.
I think in like Dick Van Dyke there was like one episode where I think Van Dyke himself was sick of it and like had like their legs sticking out and touching, and that was very scandalous.
Well, I just remember picking up on little hints too of like things in like Batman the Animated Series where it's like there's the episode where Harley and Ivy are rooming together and they only have one bed in the background. I'm like, okay, and then look where we are now today.
And Bob and Emily Hartley on the Bob Newhart Show was a huge thing. In a little way, it was a huge thing. The bedtime conversations they'd have that looked like that was the first time a sitcom or even drama, sitcom.
No, but I think the Bradys were in the same bed. The Brady Bunch.
Nobody cared about Bob and
but it's a sitcom. I mean,
look, they had a lot of kids. All right, they did something.
It is together though.
It is worth it.
Now I've got it. Now it's like I have to go back and research Brady Bunch.
I'm sorry. I just
sitting on the bed talking, or were they like actually under the covers?
I think they were actually in bed reading.
I think you're right.
Ooh, how scandalous!
Reading. Oh no.
It's been way too
long.
A
wife that's learned? Oh no.
It's been far too long since I've watched the Brady Bunch to like.
The world will keep spinning. But now Aaron, I'm like, okay, but they were always shown just reading, whereas Bob and Emily would be dark, turn a light on, wake up, and come out from under the. Okay, anyway.
Yeah,
but it's
that happened.
It is worth kind of bearing that in mind as we kind of look at the progress of like Star Trek is sort of a microcosm of that sort of like how. Maybe puritanical is the wrong word, but it's certainly a lot more conservative in terms of what they were allowed to show. And TOS did that to a certain degree. And I think, there's criticisms about mini skirts and that sort of thing. But at the time that was embracing the sexual liberation and saying like, they don't have to look like school marms all the time.
Why old men aren't going to tell me what I can wear.
Right.
It's why I love analyzing Star Trek quite often on my channel is through like a modern lens where it's like this is a good snapshot of what was considered progressive at the time it came out, and there's still a lot to learn and very clear missteps as we look at things like Code of Honor or things like that. So
I don't know what that was.
That was definitely not even progressive for the time.
That wasn't any. That was like a bunch of producers didn't know what they were doing.
But still, it's an interesting way to like look at. Well, my favorite tidbit about Code of Honor is the writer of that episode went on to write a very similar episode that was also like the third episode of Stargate SG-1, just with Asian folks. It's just like did not learn any lessons. Yep.
I have for friends getting into TNG. I have like I have a document that I give people. I was like, here's some episodes you can skip. The first one is Code of Honor. Then I'm like, no, you don't need to watch that. Like,
The Child would be something you can probably skip.
The exercise I want to play sometime is like because it was just like a decision. Somebody made some description phrase and something about I don't know. But the whole costuming and casting thing went down. But if Code of Honor, just as a script, if it was a radio show and you had no idea that it was an all-black cast and it looked colonial African, how would you critique if you totally took that whole component out of it? What would you think of it? Would it just be another like Angel
blah.
One? Or
Yeah.
I think
It
they
still wouldn't
discovered
be a
that
great
on,
episode.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's still not great.
but I remember that when Mission Logs covered it, when Ken and John covered Code of
Oh,
Honor,
yeah.
they left out they never described anyone as black when they did their episode summary thing. And it still didn't sound like a great story, but just with what was in the script, there wasn't that degree of racism. It was all in like how the people were visually depicted. That like those,
Right.
I think it's probably still
totally.
kind of there. You still
Yeah,
got,
I
like,
mean,
some sexist
much
stuff
has
in
been
there, but-
discussed and written about it. I mean, the short thing, and we can move on. It was, believe it or not, it was originally pitched as like a sort of reptilian race, and then they, at the very last minute, I believe the director said, "We
Yeah.
don't have the budget, or what if we just?"
Right.
Anyway,
Why don't we other these people?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, not a good. The
other
worst.
reptiloids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if we want to go here, but is there an episode of the animated series that you would say like, oh, we could you probably just skip that one, or is it all just kind of like the worst
Oh,
one is just
no.
kind of mediocre?
Watch
I think
all
it
of them.
really depends on what you like. If you like TAS, like don't skip them. But if you don't, then
Right.
I don't know.
I think they
What do you
all
think?
kind of have like some interesting weirdness to them. I don't know if there's anyone that I would be like.
I couldn't
Yeah.
think
I
of
would-
any that didn't age well. They're mostly just
Yeah.
well, maybe
I wouldn't
maybe
say age well, but like BEM is like such a
Right.
conglomeration of so many other things that it's like if
It's
you
my
didn't
least
see it,
favorite.
There's like no real like, oh yes, like there's a glowing space god keeping track of children on her planet, and I mean it's got good messages, but it's like it's nothing new. I guess it's just like even then it was like played out.
but then
So-
at that particular time, I believe is oh
This
wow,
is what,
look
this
at
is what
that.
Aaron wanted us to see. This is
1964.
yeah, in
Samantha
1964.
and
so-
Darren bewitched.
Love it.
Okay.
I mean, there's what I like what's interesting about the animated series is like there are clear episodes you can point to of other Star Trek shows of like that's a problem. Like there's
Yeah.
problems here, like
Right.
Code of Honor. But here, like there's episodes that like have complex conversation. I don't want to speak for any community because this is not my community, but I've heard listening through things. But like how sharper than a serpent's tooth, was there's interesting conversations I've seen from Indigenous folks about like different ways of that episode being presented, about like being very positive of like showcasing Indigenous culture, showcasing Indigenous person on the bridge, but then
It was
also
written by an Indigenous person.
Ex-
as well.
Exactly. But then I've also heard
Mhm.
other conversations as well, of people critiquing that as well, being
Right.
like, oh, our gods are seen as like just aliens, and framing other cultures as like just aliens out there. So it's an interesting, there's conversations, complex conversations rather than condemnations that you can make of something like the
Right.
Code of Honor.
yeah.
And
I
I
also
think
think with How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth has a little bit of that early 70s Von Daniken kind of right-wing white
Mhm.
supremacist sort of thing. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
oh,
Yeah.
how could they have ever built this thing? It had to have been aliens that helped them.
Exactly.
And that was so popular then. I could see even a person who's of that
Right.
descent would be like, oh, we should write something about this because it's really popular now. or
Exactly.
something.
It's still
You
even
can give
popular now.
Roddenberry-
today, so,
But yeah, that's
You can
sad.
give Roddenberry credit on being ahead of the curve on that one, because like in Roddenberry's lifetime, he was going around saying like, "No, this is horseshit. Humans are amazing. We can do all
Yeah.
kinds of great things.
Yeah,
Like,
that
we built all this
Mhm.
ourselves."
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would say from an LGBTQ sort of perspective and a little microcosm in Mud's Passion, when like everybody who has the love drug falls in love with each other as long as they're a man and a woman. Like Kirk and Spock just become good friends.
Yeah, they're just good friends
that
otherwise.
didn't age in the sense of like that doesn't make any sense. And like I don't think now you would actually never have that episode period on a children's show. So
Mhm.
but yeah,
Yeah,
that's the only
but-
thing I can think that really pops out at me is like
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think a
except
lot
for
of
the
it.
general stuff that all of Star Trek has that we know of.
Right. I think, as we were saying before, a lot of it is like, it was a product of the time. And I think Star Trek tends to try to take bold swings on issues that are controversial and try to provide a new perspective. Sometimes they fail and sometimes they succeed. And sometimes it's like they could have gone further, but at least they're trying, I think, is something that you can say about other sci-fi
Yeah.
franchises that are just like, hey, what if we just celebrate like future fascism, how cool it is.
yeah. Woo!
We'll have two
Yeah.
queer women kiss, but just like one quick shot that we can cut out of the movie for all the overseas audiences.
Which is an excuse often to just not do it at all in our audiences. So yeah, it's interesting because like, and sometimes they circle back around to being accidentally progressive, like the Outcast, where it's like ooh, non-binary people, what a weird concept. That would just so alien and strange, and then circles back around to like, hey, we're having conversations about pronouns in the 1990s. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Like that episode has issues with like conversion therapy depictions and everything like that.
Mhm.
But like it weirdly like in there when they're like, ooh, non-binary aliens, so strange, it actually weirdly circles around to being somewhat topical today. So
But
And when
that-
it started off as being a watered down,
yeah, it's meant to be
Yeah.
talking about gay issues, like just
Yeah.
like
Right,
sexuality
right.
issues. Yeah.
trying to be bold, but then got a lot of criticism at the time for being a watered down, diluted. You're not hitting it on the.
Mhm.
But that one still, I think, got a better reception than the one with DePaul and the AIDS
Oh, well,
metaphor.
yeah.
That was.
I thought you were
just-
gonna say cogenitor. Cogenitor.
Well,
is
that
the
one, yeah, that too.
messed up one.
Yeah.
So,
the DePaul one, Stigma, right? I believe is the name
Stigma,
of
yeah,
it.
Stigma,
Season,
Stigma,
season 2 of Enterprise. That episode should have come out 20 years sooner.
I was gonna
That
say
should
it'd be
have been-
great. It would be super
Yes.
progressive if it was in TNG.
Or that's not.
It was super
Or even
when,
just
it,
like 10
when it
years,
was in
10 years
TNG
sooner.
and called Blood and Fire. You know.
Well,
yeah.
Speaking
So
of, yeah.
I have a question that might be kind of a fun topic. For I guess we could start with Aaron Harvey. Everybody else, if there's one element of TAS that has not made it into alpha canon or into live action canon yet, what 2 or 3 things would you love to see show up in future episodes?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I can give this.
Well, are we talking about live action or just?
Sorry, in modern Star Trek or other shows, they're like
Because
obviously
with lower decks, it's hard because there's so many of the things that have just sort of shown up in the
right.
background.
But
Or
I mean,
whatever,
it's
so it's like,
stuff you haven't
is a
seen
story?
referenced in other Star Trek yet.
yeah,
Like
I mean, I would love
story
to
or
see
even
some-
or even just like, oh, I want to see
I want to see a Vendorian, like a live action Vendorian.
A
Which I
live
think would be really cool. Yeah,
Mm.
the shapeshifter and just something. 'cause
How do you know you
they
haven't
also have-
seen one?
Good night, everybody. No. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The fact that they had like that connection with the Romulans, that could be some really interesting thing. You could have done something with that in Picard, even because they're close to the border, and So I think that there's some really interesting things there. And now with special effects, we could also do something with Aquans. Just the underwater species, or even having them on the bridge in a suit that has because they had that sort of space suit that allowed them to serve. Because it would go with the cetacean ops. It could be kind of interesting to have even in lower decks, just have an Aquan who's on the ship and has to hang out with Matt and what's his name, the other whale, or
Kumalo.
Kilo.
Kumalo.
Kimelo, yeah.
He's
just
the one with the more
why are you
rounder head. Matt has the square head. That's why he calls him Blockhead.
just why am I here? It's like, well, this is the only place we have for you. It's like you could actually have some sort of a message about lumping similar people together or something like that. It's like, you're a water person, you want to be here. It's like, so
I mean, I always wanted to see the devil from Magics of Magus 2 to meet well, you just have him back generally because he's great. He'd be a perfect lower decks character.
He's
yeah.
super
But-
chill. He's
yeah.
super nice.
Yeah, but I would love to have him meet the Shakari, the god thing from
Yes.
yeah, just be like they like know each
Do
other.
you have a starship for me?
Yeah, no, but they're just like, oh, this guy again. He's so lame. He keeps pretending he's
They live
God.
in the same neighborhood.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
they're,
do.
they're both in the center of the galaxy, so there's
Yeah,
no reason why
exactly.
that couldn't happen.
I'm in
Yeah.
the center of the galaxy. No,
oh yeah,
I'm
that,
Unfortunately,
Mike, if you're
answer,
watching.
my answer was also going to be the
War.
vegans.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd
I
be
was
fun,
thinking.
yeah.
I was thinking.
But I guess if I had to choose something else, I do kind of like the idea of the life belts. I know it was just an
Oh.
animation trick,
that's I was thinking species, but yeah, that's
but anything, yeah. But the idea of a little personal force field that maybe just you only use in emergencies or something, and so it's not like
that would have been
dot tech or
perfect for the
whatever.
32nd century.
The
Didn't
closest
live
you
Yeah.
get-
get a mention or a shout out in the live action because I fell off my chair.
It's been a while, but
I have This is what I
I
get
don't
for
think
not
it has.
concording.
I mean,
they had
closest I
something
could-
similar. They
I mean, to
they
be
had something
fair, those
similar in
dis-
Discovery.
I was to say this Discovery like spacesuits though are so damn sexy. I will say I loved those suits.
The-
I'm
the
just saying,
closest
like the technology feels like that could have been from that era. Like,
Yeah,
we had not seen it in the lower decks or in TAS.
The closest I can think of is I believe it's Fistful of Data's when they modify the comm badge to create a personal force field temporarily.
Yeah.
And so and obviously the principal was already familiar with all of them, or they wouldn't have thought to do it. So maybe
Right.
that was kind of
Where it came
maybe
from.
an illusion, or maybe it was just Robert Hewitt Wolfing. I don't know.
I think lower decks is probably our best bet for that maybe happening too. It's like they find an old ship or something like that, and they find a life support belt. I know Jesse and I have an idea for something that I'm not going to talk about it, but it's like
we do.
related to that. So
I would love to see anything from TAS that hasn't already like turned up in something.
Yeah.
Just like any of those aliens. Just have them walk around in the background at a star base. I want to see. I want them to go back to DS9. I want to see like an Aurelian like flying around the promenade station.
Just
That'd
like
be
perching
fun.
like a gargoyle on the.
Yeah,
or like-
just,
or like
just no one makes
Jake
mention.
and
Just someone
Nogspot.
just walks by and it's just there.
he's hanging out where Jake sits.
love
It's
that.
like he's also excited, you know.
Still one of my favorite lines in all of Lower Decks is she's just like, "Sing to me." It's like, "Ah, Jim, Jesus Christ, scare the shit out of me."
You're just a low. What is it like? You're a what is a knock? No, what was it? What did she say? You're just a knockoff Aurelian, or no?
Yeah,
something
something
like
like
that.
that.
Poor
Yeah.
man's Aurelian.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
So like, why is it called the Sky Snake? Wouldn't it just be called the Snake here?
One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about hashtag Save Star Trek Prodigy is that I want to see Chakotay's Aurelian first officer. Like,
Yes.
A
He-
Draku.
he ha-
Yeah.
yeah, like I want him to like do things. I want to get to know him other than he's in like a hologram flashback for a split second. But
Yeah. Well, season 2, you do get to see more of a Draku. So
Cool.
hold on to your life belts.
yeah, that's awesome to hear.
Oh, there is one thing that I actually I'm cogitating on what I might do with it, but I would love to go back to the amusement park planet, just because it's like, holodecks have made all of that just pointless. So has this basically this alien been sitting there, the sentient computer for 100 years? Like, why isn't anybody showing up? And like, has it gone crazy? And just the idea of having like a rundown theme park is always kind of an interesting location. So what would happen if you
Yeah.
went back to this planet and like things aren't quite working right? Or
Ooh,
whatever?
I
You
love
just
that.
gave me a cool idea for like a fun YouTube video, like a defunct land, but of like bad, like fictional theme parks. That'd be kind of fun.
That would
You
be
know,
fun.
we have Rice in the 24th century. What always got me about
Right.
Shortwave was they mentioned Wrigley's Pleasure Planet.
Mhm.
I would love for that. That's not
Yeah.
TAS.
It's
story.
Yeah,
all
but what-
baseball themed.
yeah. And gum.
It's
Yeah.
like Wrigley's Field,
Yeah.
Wrigley Stadium.
Everyone on the planet is.
And
big
everybody
with
has
baseball.
gum.
In 3 flavors.
It's interesting how they don't know what gum is, but then they do know what gum is, because it's like they had the comment in it's like, "Are you chewing gum?" in the
Well,
Voyager episode.
they also chew gum in Strange New Worlds too.
Yeah, they
yeah.
calibrate
Yeah,
the thing to restore the flavor.
yeah, which is that was fun. That was
But
so
also it
fun.
starts opening
I
up so many existential questions.
Yeah.
The transporters
Hell.
work.
Well, and
The
who's
best part of that is,
baseball survival cult. Like, who is the little cult of people that are keeping baseball alive?
yeah,
Mhm.
maybe that's where they're from.
You
The
know
Wrigley's
that now.
Pleasure
See?
Planet. Yeah, I think the best part of that though is when she checks off one of the things. It's dun, 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 dun. Just like this little Star Trek theme. It's just like, it's goofy, it's silly, it doesn't make sense, but I just love it. I like when they did that in Stargate, where Samantha is singing, she's humming the theme to Stargate in the elevator, which apparently
Well,
she wanted to I cannot speak. Wanted to hum the theme to MacGyver, but couldn't remember it.
Oh,
Which that would have been amazing.
That would have been very cute.
There is actually I was trying to the other day. I was like, are there other canonical moments where the Star Trek theme song appears in Star Trek? And there actually is a scene in Deep Space Nine that I'd forgotten about, where there's a character like in Quark's bar that is singing the Deep Space Nine theme and playing it, and everyone is
beautiful.
weeping as they weep at their own theme song.
That actor
That's
was he The Trouble with Triples? Was that the episode he was in? But that was a guy from the original series who
Yeah,
plays
I
that
think so.
musician.
Um,
think-
yeah, Charlie Brill.
He was the
what's-
bartender. Or,
Huh?
it wasn't.
No, it was the
It wasn't
Klingon
Charlie
spy.
Brill. It was the. It wasn't the guy who played the K7 station bartender plays the musician. that
Oh,
was
that's right.
performing
Yes.
in Quartz.
He's
Yeah.
the- yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Patty Duke's dad. Yes.
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
in
Character name.
Conscience of the King, which as a kid I thought it was called the Con Science of a King because English is a stupid language.
Yeah.
But in that episode, you hear like the cocktail lounge version
love
of the
Oh,
the
yeah.
TOS theme.
Yeah.
It's
I
awesome.
use that. I use that. I use
party
that.
too, right?
I use that exact song sometimes for my outros on my videos. It's just like
Oh,
very
yeah.
chill. Yeah.
Well, speaking of theme songs, I will say the animated series theme song is a bop. I
Oh,
do
it is,
really
yeah.
enjoy it. Like it's not really the original Star Trek theme, but I don't care. I'm like enjoy it on its own merits.
There's an interesting story about that. They played it for Gene, and he did not realize that it wasn't. He's like, "Yeah, it sounds just like the one that we have, or the live
Yeah,
action."
that sounds
And like,
about
okay,
right.
great, yeah. I mean, he's checked out at that point of like it. It was Dorothy's show, and I wish there was a way to like. I try to reinforce that as much as I can. If it was now, she would be the showrunner. That's what they would be called. And,
Yeah.
Gene would be like a consultant essentially.
Well, unless she worked for Disney, and in which case
Well,
she
yeah.
would just be the head writer
Yeah,
in today's parlance.
but I mean, just in general though, it's like
yeah.
I'm trying to remember because now my memory's polluted because we did it on Trek Files. But did you have any meta, or were you restricted? The battle that she had at the beginning, and it wasn't the fact that it was her or a woman or anything. It was just that Filmation had this machine, and the fact that you talk about pushing the envelope, they were trying to just make it more than just a Saturday morning or like here's a dead live action primetime show that now they're just going to soak some money out of, and it's like no, this is like the step of revival. But everybody at Filmation, or most everybody, was into the whole it's another dead PM primetime show. Let's just crank it out. And Dorothy's over going, no. I'm producing a show. I need to see the dailies or the equivalents. I need to see the drafts. And she was totally shut out of the first few episodes, and things would air with mistake, all the things we love to point to. And she's screaming, and people are like, Dorothy, did you know? I can't believe you got your name on this. And she's screaming and running to Gene and going there. And finally she was like let in the door to see the late print and give notes at the end. And
part of the problem is that Filmation was a super regimented company because we had the conversation about why we're all the pink pants or pink this, purple that, whatever. And there's the story that's not accurate about the director being colorblind, which he was mildly colorblind, but he had literally nothing to do with choosing the color. You would think like, of course he did. He's the art director. No, there's a colorist, and that person decides. And if you want to talk to the colorist or the writer or whoever, it goes through a memo stage before you can actually literally meet with them. There's an upstairs and a downstairs, and those people, you barely walked up and down between the stairs. It sounds like,
Could have been an email.
Yeah, essentially. So I think also what happened is Bob Klein, who's one of the main illustrators and where we got a lot of our stuff from, he was a huge Star Trek fan. So he was also pushing for it to be like a real show as well. So I think those two probably helped each other, at least. And
remember what being a Star Trek fan meant. In 73, it meant like 4 and 5 years ago, you were there and you were pissed that it went away. And that's what being
But the fact that he worked in the Navy and drew like naval vessels and stuff like that, so he had a lot of the shipbuilding sort of gene. So I think that really helped because
Jeffries,
and when we even have a quote from Matt Jeffries, which is cool. There's a little bit of a fun thing. The person who did the original promotions also wanted to treat the show like it was a real show. Wrote weekly, like, this is coming up this week, as if it was a nighttime show, and had these press releases and sent them out, and literally like very few people ever published them.
You talk about Fred Bronson?
Fred Bronson, yeah. So we got he came to us when I interviewed him for he wrote the last episode, the counterclock incident. And he's like, oh, I was in the garage the other day and this bag fell down, and I looked at it and it's like, oh, I think Aaron might want this. It was literally all of the promotional things for every episode, and there were quotes from Dorothy and Matt Jeffries is talking about how this isn't like a cartoony version of the Enterprise. They literally talked to me, and we did it's drawn the way it's supposed to be, and so.
Oh, that's fun.
Well,
I know like those things came out of nowhere. It was like those probably hadn't been published since the 70s, if they were published at all.
I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think that's why it's kind of important to have discussions like this, is because so much of this archival material and history is literally just sitting and rotting in someone's garage.
Oh, yeah.
Unless someone dares to ask the question of like, hey, can we revisit that? Or how was that made?
And that's
You
why we
know?
wanted to do this. It's just capture those stories. And unfortunately, we lost a couple people like in the middle of it. But speaking of how sharper than a serpent's tooth, both of them at one point, David Wise and
Russell Bates.
Russell Bates. Yeah, thank you. He was talking to me, and I should actually just pull them out of Facebook and put them down now, but Rich was very like, if we didn't talk to him on the project, we can't use the copy, and you can't use your Saturday morning Trek, interviews and all that stuff. So I'm like, all right, he's very journalistic, which I'm fine with, but it was interesting.
You just cite with the source. That's ridiculous. But anyway,
we were trying also to do like two sources, so we had more than one, person.
So it wasn't just one person's recollection of something from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of which, did you ever see Trexpertise's interview with Russell Bates?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good interview. With
yeah.
him.
But he, unfortunately, we had a weird issue where it's like, the book got approved really quickly and all that stuff, and then we're like, okay, it's like, John's like, okay, don't do anything until the contract's signed because you never know, and the contract sat on the people's desk for 5 months. And we're like, we didn't stop completely, because if we had, we never would have got the book out on time. Yeah. But it was just like in that time period, Russell Bates had passed away. And and then we luckily got Dorothy, like an interview with her via email. But she passed away not that long afterwards. So even having her back to discuss and like, follow up or anything, we couldn't do that. So, but yeah, so those, and a lot of the filmation people, I was really happy that animation at that time was more of not still, I guess, a young person's game as far as like the actual doing of it, because Bob Klein was like he was like 23 or something when he was doing this. Remember when he came to my house for the initial interview, and my reaction was like, "Oh, did Bob's son bring him?" Because they had totally mislabeled the age that he was. So I'm expecting like this 89-year-old guy to come to the door, and it's like, "You look really good for 89." It's like, "What?" And it's like, he looked, "That's not my age." So, but yeah, no, getting we lost a lot of people. So I really enjoy being able to capture these stories, because up until now, people didn't really seem all that interested in TAS either. So
that's
Well, in the Prodigy writers' room, we had a signed script from DC Fontana as just sort of like a reminder to us of like the legacy that we were part of, and
nice.
always try to push the envelope, because this was, for all intents and purposes, real Star Trek that we were dealing with, and not just a quote unquote Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, y'all are very much
a kiddie show is what she called it.
Yeah, y'all are the only two Trek shows that really had the, like, fight that battle, just kind of like justify your, your seat at the table too, among all the other shows. Aaron, is there anything, like, I guess we should wrap up soon. But
yeah, sorry about that.
Is there
went off from the story there.
You're great, Aaron. But like, Aaron Walkie, like, is there anything like you could tell us about, just like I guess it's kind of from y'all's perspective, the people who worked on Prodigy, just like, I know everyone's like super optimistic about finding Prodigy a home, but just is there anything else that like you want to say just about like the just kind of like the mood like with y'all right now with what's going on?
I mean, we as we've said elsewhere, the show, we are continuing to make the show. We never stopped making the season 2. So for us, it's pretty much just a constant. It's been the continuity hasn't stopped, and every episode that I've seen is looking better and better. Like we figured out kind of like the formula, I think, of how to make a feature quality animated show, or as close as we can to it, on the budget and in the pipeline that we have. I think the support that the fans have given us is overwhelming on both a personal and in terms of the fate of the show level. And so, just keep keep the faith. What like things are trending very positively, and I think that we all believe we will have very good news. So save Star
great to
Trek
hear.
Prodigy.
Oh yeah.
Has Nickelodeon rented out your office space?
No, we're
Good.
still making the show.
Well, I mean, some of those empty cubicles.
You're just working and somebody comes in and like starts
saying,
pushing
that's
you out of the way, puts a box down.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can speak for everyone here to say we're very excited to see it when we see
Yeah.
it. Not
Yes.
if, but when we see it, because I'm
Yeah.
very, very excited.
And I do want to say, just because we're all here and everybody's watching, like, do support all of our Trek brethren do need our support, and the strike and as they're fighting for fair wages. I've posted links to the entertainment fund,
Good.
which will help all workers that are affected by the strike currently. And I think we all want a fair and equitable solution as quickly as possible, so we can all keep enjoying Star Trek. So,
And also on the I know it was on the Channel 7 report, if I post that there's also these different funds for the kind of satellite businesses, like the restaurant.
Yes.
There's a restaurant fund for the people who like there are tons of restaurants around these studios that no one's going to because they aren't going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of ancillary industries that are affected, which you wouldn't necessarily think if you just
Right.
like
And it's worth noting, I think, that the 1973 writers' strike is partially why so many great writers were able to come over and work on the animated series as well. And so it is this really interesting sort of rhyming of history that we find ourselves once again at this crossroads. But I think it will be a positive outcome for everybody, as long as we kind of keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, it'd be nice if creatives weren't still having to, like fight their employers for like fair contracts 50 years later after they were having to do that. But I guess it's just
But it's a constant, and
Yeah.
we're fighting not really necessarily just for our own careers, but for the reason we have residuals, for instance, is because a bunch of people stood up in the 1960s, I believe, and basically put their careers on the line, even though they had already made their nut or whatever. They were like, this is not for me. It's because I want this profession to continue.
Yeah.
And
That's
so-
why.
And
That's
in
why
73,
solidarity is
the-
important.
Yes.
Well,
The one in
it's-
73, the WGA, basically their thing that they were not railing against, but they were fighting against was videotapes and cable. Like that was their AI essentially, and streaming rights. But it's very similar. In fact, we were talking about that earlier. There's just some interesting parallels, even like how people perceived cable. It's probably the reverse. It's probably AI is probably more dangerous than what they made cable out to be. But that was interesting.
Well, anytime there's a paradigm shift, then you go along, you fight, then you have a calm, and then when there's like reruns were the first big thing, and all the new techs have been a challenge, and new media in 07. But the reason when you see like the double strike, the 1960, that was about residuals that affected everybody. And now you've got AI, but you've also got the whole streaming revolution and this lack of transparency. And so when there's a whole new shift in things, it's like, no, status quo. There is no status quo. We need to reinvent what the status quo is. We can't keep coasting along while you guys just take advantage of us.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
look at a strike. That's an inflection point of something going on.
And trying to use these things like AI that should be tools to help enable humans to do things, instead using it to replace and automate humans, because that's
Right.
It's what creativity, just trying to automate creativity, which you can't do.
That's something like I read recently was some futurist from like the 1930s was saying in the 21st century we'll have so much automation that all of the jobs will be performed by technology and we'll just all live very pleasant lives, and our biggest obstacle will be what do we do with all of our free time now that so few of us have to work.
Right.
Mhm.
It was believed that it would free us up to pursue our creative
Yeah.
interests or philosophical pursuits, a la Star Trek.
Yeah.
But instead, we're just turning those machines to replace the things that make us human.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, well, I'll put on my leftist hat and be it's capitalism where it's
Right.
the upper class just wishes to try to keep an consistent underclass.
Yeah.
Huzzah. But
Poor
anyways.
Edith. She had the right idea, but at the wrong time.
Right.
It is interesting because I was
With
watching
that-
Crisis Point 2
Yeah.
I was watching
Yeah.
Crisis Point 2 last night with the
love that.
at the Star Trek Lower Decks thing.
That was oh my god! I wish I had seen that on big
it
screen.
was
Sorry.
it was great, but I was watching it and I was just thinking about like how this episode was it only was a few years ago, but it's still prescient to today because the whole thing is about like, oh, they go off the beaten track and Boimler's trying to find meaning in this randomly generated side story that is being made by AI, and he ultimately finds out, oh look, it just creates a random idea generator that means nothing. And it's about like trying to find meaning in your own life through your own humanity. It's like,
Yeah,
oh
it was-
wow, that's actually weirdly prescient of a topic.
Yeah.
that Laura
It
Dixon
was
did.
just like regurgitating platitudes and cliches
Yeah.
to him, which is exactly what AI does. So
Exactly. It was a very topical episode.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a brilliant point, Jesse.
Lower Decks is more political than people think.
And we talked about this a little bit, but I find it crazy that they won't tell anyone how many streams their shows get. And I was like, I get metrics at my job, so I can know how I'm doing.
Well-
That's the norm for
is it.
all professions except this one, apparently.
Right. And ironically, they already do it in Europe. So it's not
Yeah.
Yeah.
like it's just
By
a big-
law.
by
Mm.
law.
I had
Yeah.
I'm not part of a union because I'm a freelancer, so I don't have that backing. But I have had conversations with people about like, this is going to take jobs away from graphic designers. Like, well, it doesn't look that good. It's never going to be good enough to be what you're doing. I'm like, it may not be, but it's good enough. And that's if you know anything about clients and clients that work for
already-
big companies, they don't care. They just like if it's okay, then it's fine.
I
And
mean,
they don't want the best thing. They don't want good.
The
They
art
just want
using is down.
passable.
I have already seen people start doing like AI book covers, which I find very hypocritical. Authors who would use an AI
Yeah.
cover when they wouldn't want.
I've seen people
AI.
doing AI books and
Yeah.
they look bad.
I
Mm.
didn't
Even
watch
in
it, but
RPGs, they had something they finished. They fired the people who were doing the artwork, and then they had the computer finish it essentially.
Well,
And
it's
there's
also
just-
one
it
of the new
speaks- it
Disney
speaks-
shows.
Yeah.
Didn't they do like
The Secret Invasion.
Secret Invasion?
yeah,
like the opening.
they said that they did that on purpose. I don't know.
Yeah.
But-
I don't want to see an orc with 7 fingers, okay?
Yeah.
It's just not really
Exactly.
Well, it also
Yeah.
it speaks to like what art needs to be about and how the continual push. Sorry, I don't want to get too political here, but like the push to
No,
the
go for
right
it.
of things. But it's just art. The reason that art is so important is it allows us to connect empathetically to other people and think deeply about the world in which we live
Yes.
in. And by creating things that are just generated off by AI or just like basically just stitching together a bunch of different things without any intrinsic deeper meaning, it forces us to not be able to introspect and just see the surface. And that's what a lot of like fascism and right-wing thought sort of thrives upon, is just seeing aesthetics, just seeing, the surface level, not introspecting on humanity, not introspecting on empathy. And as a result, it just creates art that just becomes more vapid and just distills more and more meaningless things that end up echoing, these nonsense right-wing talking points. So, yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
So,
Aaron,
depressing
Aaron
note.
Harvey. I don't. Well, I don't. It doesn't
No,
have to be
no,
depressing. It
yeah.
can just.
No,
it's,
I
it's
just
just
think it's
important. It's important
Mhm.
that we keep these issues in mind.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah.
and that's what Star Trek is so good about.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
Star
probably a
Trek.
good note to end on. Unless Aaron Harvey, if you had was there anything else we needed to cover?
No, I don't think so. Just if you haven't seen the animated series, check it out. It's worth a look. If you want to learn more about it while you're doing it, you can get our book. Try to get it at a local bookstore if you can, because they're hurting more than like Amazon is or anything like that.
Yeah.
And if you can't find it right now, there will be more of them coming out at some point. That's all I can say.
Oh, I have a very quick question that maybe you have an answer for.
Yes.
Is in terms of watch order,
Yes.
would you recommend people just watch it beginning to end, or would you say like a couple that you should sample,
Hmm.
or is there a production order thing that's screwed
No,
up
the
too?
production order, that was just sort of that was a little bit arbitrary. I think
Okay.
Bem was supposed to be in for the first season, and it got
Sure.
pushed, which is
Okay.
interesting because it created this weird thing where it looked like there was an extra episode that we had never seen because it
Oh,
says
interesting.
23.
Huh.
So it's the 23rd episode. Like, wait, there's only 22. Where we were convinced that there was one that we hadn't seen and there it was hiding, and like, no, that's just
Secret
a production
episode.
order
So
issue.
so just start. So your recommendation,
Yeah.
just start at the beginning and watch it.
I would say don't start with Yesteryear because it is good, and it's also like
Okay.
I know that's but it kind of sets the. It's
High bar.
very different than the
Yeah.
high bar, but it's also a different. That and the Slaver Weapon are two very different shows than kind of the rest of the episodes.
Sure.
So those are kind of special and unique. But yeah, you can start anywhere. I would say starting with the first one, it gives you a good introduction to the technology of TAS and some of the things that are different. So it does fit the first episode being the first one that you see.
There you go. Start. No place to start like the beginning.
And hey, Aaron, would you say, I'm just thinking this, would you say that after our discussion that the animated series being out of the spotlight, not canon, now it is, no Star Trek at all, being ignored, you say that TAS is maybe as relevant as it's ever been today, or even more so?
I would say yeah. I mean,
Like
as far as
referred to in all the others, especially Lower Decks, but all the other
Yeah.
shows tinge on it.
I think it was trying to consider what it was almost like when the actors talked about it, it was more like we're doing this promotional thing. It was like it's something that kept Star Trek kind of in the limelight, but it wasn't really Star Trek. But now looking back, it's like, oh, this really was a continuation of the original series. They're stories that very easily could have been in the original series. So, and now people are reflecting on that more, and they're seeing the things that we talked about, like Uhura taking control and things that like, oh, that's kind of progressive for that time. So I think it is probably more, at least more in the limelight and more important retrospectively now than it had been in the past. A lot of times it was just like, it's a thing to sell, DVDs.
But I mean, as a
Isn't
fan,
that a goofy show? They actually sometimes some of the frustration I had, and I know Jesse knows about this. Is just it's like, hi, it's the goofy '70s show. Yuck, yuck, yuck. And you're like, it's like there's more to it than it just being quote unquote bad animation. But yeah, so I think people are discovering that though, which is great.
Yeah. I'm just saying there were years and years and years in fandom where if you never saw the animated series, you were just fine. And
Yeah.
now it really
Or if
adds
you did,
on
even you saw it,
other
you'd be like, this is not real. Don't pay attention to it. There are people who literally would do that too. Like,
Right.
well, that's not real Star Trek.
well,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It does seem more relevant in today's era than at any other point that I know of. Like,
Yeah.
at
well, I
least,
mean,
like in
for the
my
Star Trek
observations.
franchise as a whole and being a fan, much less just of it.
I can't even see 10 years ago. If 10 years ago was the 50th anniversary, I don't think any of this stuff that we've been doing would have happened.
Now, I think there'll always be people that go, "Oh, that '70s animation, I just can't take it."
That's yeah.
Same
I
way
can
they
see
go,
that.
"Oh, that '60s TOS, I just can't take it."
Yeah,
I think it's the love of like the weirdness of Star Trek, that
Yeah.
Star Trek
it's
is
another
what-
level of weirdness.
Yeah, well,
I-
what makes Star Trek so wonderful in my book is that it can be very serious and very meaningful, but also very strange, and that makes it what feels human. And
mean,
the animated series goes to that. Sorry, Rachel, I was cutting you
Yeah,
off.
and I was gonna say I'm known for my love of just like very goofy Star Trek episodes, and I'm like, it's funny because people are like, "What's like your favorite?" I was like, "Wait, what kind of mood are you in?" Like that's like before
Yeah.
I recommend.
Well,
That's a good point.
as my friend Tilly Bridges often says, "Bonkers Trek is the best Trek."
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
It's a very good place
Mhm.
to be. I think if you watch
Yeah.
a Trek episode, you walk away and just you can't stop thinking about it. And TAS certainly has its fair share of big swings, which are like that's like the direct route to my heart. Is
Mhm.
Yeah.
give me giant Spock every day of the week.
Yep.
Where were you all when I was writing the back of the book? This would have been much better than what we came up with.
Well, I think this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we were
Yes.
all able to get together and celebrate the animated series and talk about Star Trek animation for 2 hours, despite the official platform giving it like a 22-minute YouTube video yesterday. But
Mhm.
That's what it said.
whatever their little Paramount Plus video was that they their Star Trek
yeah,
Day
the official
video.
one. Yeah, they had like a minute and 12 seconds of TAS.
And
that
that
was
video,
just
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No
I have a
comment.
weird story with that video because the wonderful Jackie Cox is in it, doing a little bit as like a drag queen asking people on the street. The time that she was doing that, was filming that a few months ago, was my first like script read for my film that she is in. She's one of the starring roles in it. So I'm like, we were all waiting for her to finish that damn shoot, just sitting there. And then she's in like a locker room afterwards, still in that full costume on a phone doing the script read for my film on that day. So I'm watching that. I'm like, that's what you were doing that whole goddamn time. It's very
That's
funny.
hilarious.
It's
That's
just imagine when you're
amazing.
watching that, just
Yeah.
imagine me sitting very like frustratedly.
Oh, I wanted to, Aaron, for your benefit, one last thing. For all the talk about Prodigy being market-wise excised from all the the major studio projects today, there was an official piece of artwork that was emphasized. It had tons of
Yes.
all the Prodigy characters were in it. That was studio. So it was almost like a left hand, right hand, not knowing what was going on. I think, but
Yeah, I can't really speak to what happened there.
I know.
But I think it's just a very weird situation that I think will hopefully be resolved eventually. And
See,
this
that-
will
And
be
I
a
think
distant.
some of it was just people trying to like who could do it would get it in when they could, because I don't think there's anybody on the creative side that was like, no, I don't want to put it in because it's not on our channel. That's everybody would try to put it in, so it's just whatever made it in.
But you did see that big piece that
Oh
had
yeah,
like,
yeah. I actually asked John if it's for sale somewhere.
I actually want to hang that up in my office somewhere. It actually made me feel very proud to be a part of the legacy of animated Star Trek, which started with the animated series.
I think you
with
can turn the
all
poster upside
characters.
down too, right? It's
I mean, all of it's I love all of it. I love Star Trek and I love animation. So it's like the synthesis of all my favorite things.
They gave out popcorn buckets with that image on it. By the way, I have one saved in the other room
I
from
saw
last
that.
night.
I need
was
my
like,
I need my Murph popcorn bucket.
Yeah.
It's the 21st century Spock helmet.
we need our Murph everything's.
yeah.
The fact that Star Trek like shop has not merchandised the numerous
Anything.
plushie worthy character like the tardigrade, Moopsie now, and Murph. Like, come on, like give me
I
Murph
mean,
stuff.
funny,
Yeah.
the cardboard Murph I made, several people at Vegas were like, wait, where did you buy that? And I was like, I had to make it.
There's
Like
there's
this
so
thing,
many opportunities for Star Trek plushies, and
Yeah.
they fail every time.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that'll have to be another discussion. We'll do a stream next year on
about
after Star
branding?
Trek Day, talking
That'll-
about all
my
the
rant about how we
merchandise.
see more merchandise.
Yeah,
yeah, all the missed opportunities with
Yeah.
merchandising.
Give me a little humanoid, like adorable humanoid Murph doll. Like, I want that real bad.
We want, and maybe we still get them. We were like, we need Murph slippers that whenever you
I
step,
made those.
it goes-
Oh
it
my
goes-
god!
It goes Murph.
You remember that early
I
on?
would buy
Yeah.
5,000.
You ever see
Oh no.
when it was they had just announced the or it was like the first year of the Lower Decks T-shirt club, and so as a joke for the Hegemans, I made the Star Trek Prodigy slipper club.
Yes,
And the first one was Murph's.
Ah.
Like, yeah, it's like,
yeah, I remember that vaguely.
and then the person who makes some of the others, the Star Trek stuff, the not the Star Trek shop, but the other, like the people in the plate, Star Trek Unlimited.
Mm.
That's what it is. I think.
Yes,
They're like,
yeah.
oh, we were trying to figure out how to make those. They actually asked me for the file so they could look at it.
Yeah,
So, like, maybe one day we will. Get
maybe
Murph's.
one day.
Well, you
Yeah.
see, Aaron
Keep
Hardy.
tweeting.
Yeah, now you got to go to Van Sitter's office and try to pitch him the slippers, and then as soon as you leave, he'll call you back, and be like, "This never happens." But some like slipper company just called us, and they're like, "Can we do some licensed slippers with Star
Yeah.
Trek?" So
Just
don't think
just
you need
person
me
his
to make
office and
slippers.
just say the slippers and the Salot are the key to everything. And then,
Sailot
Yeah.
slippers.
Working drawings in 5 days.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is fun, gang.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to talk
Yes.
about
Great to
TAS.
see y'all.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah, tons of fun. People should tweet, retweet, hashtag save Star Trek Prodigy. Let's find that show a home. Everyone,
Yes.
subscribe to Jesse on YouTube. Subscribe to Larry on YouTube. People can check out Rachel here on Tex-Trek on Thursdays with first reactions to new episodes, and then Aaron and I do the deep dive discussions Friday nights. You can listen to that on the Tex-Trek podcast or the Drawn to Trek podcast, and we're gonna have Jesse on in the near future to talk about an upcoming episode very soon. So lots of cool stuff going on there, and thanks everyone who tuned in live. Thanks everyone who's watching this later. But until next time, as
Thank you.
always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Long and prosper
Long.
and Trek
Live
well.
logs and proper.
Yes.